We should have plenty of time.
All righty, it is 2:30, and we will start our study session for April the 4th. I'm learning now just to look to see who's sitting up front, but I will still give the city manager the prerogative to give an introduction, if he would like.
I don't have a whole lot of color commentary to provide other than it's a pretty exciting initiative that's going on, and I'll turn it over to Brad to kick it off.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I hope you'll find this a good news day and informative. Our staff has been working for a number of months on a new initiative that you're going to hear about, a partnership with a lot of private entities and then quite a bit of Joan's time along with community engagement. So to give just a little bit of context, and we can go ahead and start, Jacob. To give just a little bit of context to our history in Salina, especially for the newer commissioners. I know that you're familiar with some of our early history and some of the things that may surround this, but real briefly, going back as early as about the 1980s, late 70s, early 80s, as the community was doing strategic planning and visioning and Chamber of Commerce initiatives and so on, there was this regular message that, boy, we're doing some cool things inside facilities, but it doesn't look like it on the outside. And that went on through a cultural plan that was done in the mid-90s, and that was raised again there, but there wasn't a specific initiative out of that until, and you can go to the next one, until the 25th anniversary of the Smoky Hill River Festival. And in 1998 or 99, in preparation for the 25th anniversary, which was in 2001, the steering committee and Arts and Humanities brought to this body a desire to create a public art program. We hadn't had a formal program. We'd had a lot of visiting artists over the years and different installations related to festival and other things, but we didn't have a formal program. And with your consent, over the next 7 years or so, that was researched, planned, plotted, designed, and now is part of that community art and design policy that we have. A lot has transformed in that time. In the last 20 years, it took about 10 years of declaring the policy and putting the first piece of public art up at the animal shelter as part of the festival in 2001 to now. There are about 50 new pieces throughout the community that didn't exist then. Not all of them publicly funded. Some of those are private, and that doesn't include sculpture tour and some of the private things that are visible as well. That's just artwork in public places. And so it truly has transformed our community, and that's part of the reason that we're here today. There's a lot of movement that Joan is going to be sharing with you about that. And about our response to it to better equip our community. So the references here to where public art is taking place, not only in Salina but around the state, is something to keep in mind. And you can go to the one more. In conjunction with this, the state of Kansas has an initiative for murals in public places that they're putting funding towards. Joan and I just participated in a conference a month ago with with murals in public places and brought artists and organizations from all across the state to Wichita for a few days to discuss that and to set direction and guidance and best practice models going forward. So with that being said, the list of all of the organizations that you see down below, the Kansas Department of Commerce and Creative Arts Industries Commission put some money on the table that we'll look at later, but in addition to that, Main Street, Greater Salina Community Foundation, and the Kansas Tourism and National Endowment for the Arts, the River Festival, Leadership Salina, The Canvas project that Travis Young and that team are running with the new private sector murals and Salina Downtown are all partners at the table to make what you're going to see possible. So with that, I'm going to introduce Joan Benefiel. Joan's been with us for about a year and is our visual arts coordinator. She oversees the public art program and all things visual art related to the Smoky Hill River Festival, and she's helped put together a great deal of what you're going to see today. So, Joan?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us. I'm really happy to be here and get to share with you, so thanks for taking the time. We can go to the next slide. So public art, as we've come to know it, takes on lots of different forms. It's often attached to or incorporated into architecture. Go to the next slide, please. You will, of course, recognize the art bookending 9th Street. We've got Dawn Silver lining up down south, excuse me, and the Creative Railroad Crossing inspired lighting there up north, and of course the Field House. We have so many examples and a rich history of intentionally incorporating and prioritizing good design into architecture and infrastructure and the entryways. Next. So we have the North Ohio Railroad overpass, and even our wayfinding signs relay that same message about how we prioritize good design and make choices to incorporate it into the environment. More things that you'll all recognize, but I just thought it'd be fun to do a quick run through. We have the sculptural wall of fire at TPEC, the gorgeous glass mosaic at Kenwood Cove, and then the beautiful bas-relief work at the animal shelter, and the freestanding sculpture as well. It's also tied into wall work at the municipal court. And of course, at the water treatment plant, you have this really creative and fun interpretation of water and their processes to relay that message as well. And they're all really great examples of the many ways that creativity and beauty and art can be folded into our everyday environments, which is the beautiful thing about public art. It creates everyday positive experiences for anybody who happens to come across them. So of course, murals are great for artistic placemaking and city marketing. Everyone, of course, knows and loves this piece. And, you know, taking into consideration the variety of how murals are made. And the Kate sisters are painting with brushes. A lot of people will spray only, power spray, spray cans, make stencils, spray through those, paint through those, any combination of all those things. And then when you take into consideration all the different artists that are doing it, their styles, what their job might be, if it's just self-expression or if they're relaying a message that someone hired them to do, there's a huge range of results that you can get, and the possibilities are really, really endless. It truly is a mural making renaissance right now all over the country and the state and right here in Salina. But we're not new to this. Salina has been intentionally incorporating murals and street art into the urban environment for a long, long time. I'll run through a couple of these pieces that are around town. This is the artist called Gear, who's done a lot of work in the arcades and in the alleys. I don't know if you can see, but in the little lower right-hand corner there, it says 2005. So that's a good number of years ago now that piece is still there, and it's, you know, got some good protection, so it's still looking good. And that was actually a part of a series of murals that were Festival Artist in Action series. Again, another by the artist Gear. And below that, we have Steve Britt's Lone Ranger, which ventured out of downtown and into Oakdale Park as a part of the festival. And that's still there, so we get to enjoy that every year. And on the next slide, That's just a tradition that keeps on going and growing. That's the artist Scribe, who comes every year at the festival and works on a piece from absolutely blank wall to finished by the end of the weekend, and everybody comes and watches and gets to see that happen. And what's really great is we then get to keep that. It's part of the city collection, and we get to share these pieces throughout the community in other locations. So just maybe 2 weeks ago or something, we have loaned his 2019 piece that he made at the park to, it's out at Salina Tech in the classroom hallway. So that's a lot of fun. And we're getting ready to place the one from last year too. And of course, everyone might have seen this piece up at the mill, Salina Canvas bringing Australian artist Guido van Helten to do this incredible monumental piece and basically just gift Salina with this incredible work of art. And it's with all this great history to build on that what we are telling you about today, the Make a Mark initiative, is along with Canvas Project and other supporters and partners, offering the Salina community opportunities to work with local and regional artists on a smaller yet still impactful scale. So overview of Make a Mark projects. On our little map on the right, you see a pink circle and it has a little pink canvas on it. There are 3 distinct components of this sort of launch of the Make a Mark initiative. The first is the new stage wall at Santa Fe and Ash. That's up at the top there. And then a little further down indicates the Campbell Plaza new stage. It'll be the back and front of that will get painted. And then the cluster of little circles below that, that indicates the series of alley walls and the trash corral in the parking lot behind the steeple. So those are the 3 things that we're launching. So for the new stage wall at Santa Fe and Ash, we are really lucky and excited to have Dave Lowenstein out of Lawrence, Kansas, coming back to Salina to do this new piece. He was selected by the Leadership Salina Green Team, and thank you, Josh, for coming, representing the Green Team, and the Community Art and Design Committee and Arts and Humanities acting as resource partner. He has a really inclusive and educational approach to community mural making. He likes to create the design with input from a multi-generational group of local people and actually work with them, envisioning what it's going to be, finding out what they'd like to see, what things would mean something to them, how they can see themselves in the work, and then actually inviting them to paint as well. One really great aspect about having Dave as the lead artist for this new piece is that he was the artist for Waiting in the Wings back in 2010, and this is the piece that was just lost in the Campbell Plaza renovations. And so it's going to be really nice because he feels like, and we feel like, it's going to be a chance for the community to sort of help heal from the loss of that iconic piece. People were really connected to that and miss it, and this will be a nice way to move forward.
Joan, before you go on, for the commissioner's standpoint, when the inclusiveness that Dave has, he pointed out to the groups that he presented to the icons and the images that were in the 2010 and how they got there, including photographs of some of the Art Deco at the Stiefel or United Building and Roosevelt Lincoln and other places, and then those icons ended up on that piece. Some of the floral things that are on there, you can take that mural and go down and look at that. And so that kind of direct community connection is important for both citizens to learn, oh, this is why artists make things look this way, but also for us to be able to celebrate our history.
True. He also had a lot of picture taking with local kids and residents, and so people really literally see themselves in his work. But it all starts with just a wall, a plain wall. And it takes a lot of work to get from this to something that is as beloved as a piece like Waiting in the Wings was. And so we've begun that process of developing what is going to go on this new stage wall. 1 second, we can go back to that for a minute. In fact, we just this Friday and Saturday, we had 4 visioning sessions with Dave. He came into town Friday morning. And all in all, I would say a little over 100 people, maybe even 110 people, got to work with him from anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, where he presented his process and how he works and what a community mural really is for him, and then working with him in his visioning process. We went out to South High, we went out to Presbyterian Manor to a packed house, and then we had 2 sessions, thanks to the Salina Art Center warehouse, hosted us there that evening and Saturday afternoon. So that process is well underway and looking really good so far. Okay, we're ready to go on. For the new stage at Campbell Plaza, this piece, the back and the front, so it's dual pieces, this is really all about local presence and local artist. So Salina artist and designer Eric Montoy. Is he in the audience? No. Has been selected to do this painting. He was selected through the direct selection process to fulfill a desire by the downtown property owners and stakeholders for a strong and really local presence for this new stage, and also for his really engaging and bold graphic style, which you see some examples of here. We can go to the next. That's where it stands, released sometime last week or so. The Campbell Plaza stage partners include local developers, an adjacent business owner, the city, arts and humanities staff who helped organize the artist selection, and upcoming community engagement components. This timeline will be approximately 60 days later than the stage at Santa Fe and Ash, which I should have said the goal is to be completed or mostly complete by the first Friday in May. So it's going to be a quick turnaround. Okay, next slide. So Artwork Alley, Mural Expo walls, and the trash corral that's there in the city parking lot. The murals we're planning for this are going to majorly activate this space. Initially, the walls were identified by the Canvas project, and then they were repaired, primed, and painted by the property owners, which is a huge, really valuable, helpful thing to have done, and they're ready to go. When this space blooms, which is essentially what's about to happen, it'll help a lot with inspiring more pedestrian use of the alley and the parking lot. And by working together on this with Canvas and other partners, we are really hoping to inspire other property and business owners around downtown and all over town to do similar projects. So this is Hutchinson artist Brady Scott, and he was selected to be the lead artist and curator for the group of artists that's going to paint the murals in the alley. His selection was made in consultation with the Canvas Project, Arts and Humanities, the property owners, and Salina Downtown Inc. and the Downtown Merchants Association have also collaborated on this project development. Here's a little sneak peek at the flyer for this. It's going to culminate in a weekend, well, Friday night and a Saturday, and Sunday for anyone who still wants to come down and watch, a whole event that weekend. Food trucks, DJ, music, and that whole list of artists over there on the right are all going to come, and we'll advertise far and wide for people to come. It'll be a family-friendly, fun event to come and watch these artists in action go from, blank wall to the incredible, colorful thing that it's going to become. Also, the Mural Expo guests will get to make their own mark. And so while they're watching the artists paint the murals, they're going to have an opportunity to pick up some paintbrushes and paint barrel trash containers for the festival, which will be great because those will then go over to the festival and be used year after year and add to that collection. The parking lot already gets a lot of use, as you know. So the murals will get a lot of love. There are a variety of restaurants and shops who have rear entrances in this area. More than 30 national touring acts use the parking area every year when they're performing at the Stiefel. Also, members of the Salina Symphony use the lot for all of their rehearsals, including 200 kids who rehearse weekly for youth symphonies and choir. And the Artwork Alley Mural Expo 22 artists are, there are 9 artists altogether. I didn't have space to show an example of all of their work, but there's 6 of them up there. It's Brady and 8 other local and regional artists. We have 3 who are local. So Darren Morowitz, Chase Wheeler, and Colin Benson are local Salina artists. 4 regional out of Wichita, Hutch, and Kansas City, and then 1 from Texas and 1 from Colorado. You'll likely recognize Colin Benson's piece up there in the middle on the top. He's the artist that does the Riverbank mural every year, so it's going to be really fun to give him something else to do around town.
He also did the Sharp Performance Building and has done some other murals for private business that may or may not, I mean, some are inside, others are out, but he's been an active muralist for a number of years.
Yep. This is just a fun little map to share with you, the layout that we've got planned for where the artists are going to paint and how we're dividing up that wall. You can kind of imagine how striking it's going to be when this is all painted up. And the trash corral there, that's where that's going to be skinned with a nice surface for painting on, and that's the part that Chase Wheeler and Colin Benson together are going to create a big, just sort of full surround mural on that. This is just a fun little illustration of how much murals can really change a space. Brady gave me these pictures to share with you. They're before and after pics. The one on the top is in Eureka, Kansas, and below is down in Wichita. It makes quite a difference. I turn it over to Brad.
Regarding the budget, and you can relax that I'm not going to read all of this to you, but, and this is an update from your packet. I decided instead of giving you the big picture of how much the overall project was, you might want to know where things are coming from. So State of Kansas, the Earl Bain Foundation, the private underwriting, the Canvas project, because it was a series of buildings that they'd identified, and again, we used the private contribution of the building owners to sand, prime, paint, repair those buildings. We were able to use the nearly $7,000 of in-kind that they provided to the project as part of the grant match for the state, which is wonderful. And so altogether, there's, and I should also say, I don't have an exact amount for one of those, so that may be just a little bit low. But after Joan got the artists and Brady aligned for the backs of the buildings that are on Santa Fe, Gus Applequist also privately commissioned Brady or one of the artists to do the long wall that's adjacent to Hannah Applequist's studio. And so that design has been finished. Brady is going to take on that wall and has found the artists for the others. And so the project grew beyond even what we had originally planned on the grant. So our grant request originally was for about $45,000, and now it's gone up because of the private nature of that addition. So we welcome that, and that's the very kind of thing that Joan was talking about, hoping to inspire. Bottom line for you as commissioners, we are going to have some public funding and time in this. Obviously, Joan has spent a lot of time in coordination. We're going to be using our time to solicit in-kind donations and partnerships within the community, and time with SDI and time with the Canvas project folks and accommodations for those artists. But overall, in terms of cash budgeting for the city, we're utilizing about $3,000 worth of festival funding for artists in action and performance. We're designating to this pre-festival activity, which will take place the third weekend of May. It's one of the larger pre-festival activities we've done in a number of years. Sometimes it's a workshop with kids and puppet making. Other times it's been an artist doing an extensive week-long workshop for a handful of people. Other times it's been multiple demonstrations by an artist at a local vendor or shop where work can be made. But in this case, utilizing the festival, much like the animal shelter, that brick carving and art was demonstrated at the festival, and then some of those bricks ended up going back to Oklahoma or Nebraska to be fired and numbered and brought back to Salina. So in this case, it's a way for the festival to kind of pay it forward year round with both our time and a small investment. The in-kind speaks for itself. There's discounts that local companies provide, either in providing free equipment, staff time, professional services, discounts on materials and paint and supplies, and the accommodations that are being made by the local businesses. By the way, one of the businesses, Apron Strings, that will be getting a new mural, when we told them that the downtown merchants about the artist selection process and who was curating, the Apron Strings owner, who lives in Hutchinson, had just hired Brady Scott to do the back of her building in Hutch. So it was a happy moment for her to know that somebody she trusted and valued as a painter was involved. So, and a little asterisk that the budget's subject to change. That's our closest estimate in terms of cash, but some things may fluctuate. We may not need as much cash if we get a larger than anticipated in-kind, but we wanted to be sure to have enough cash in hand so that if somebody said, no thanks, I'm not going to donate this, or I'm not going to discount this product, then we have enough to make sure that's all paid. So go ahead, Joan.
Touching on care and maintenance for the new murals, Salina Arts and Humanities will follow best practices for the care and maintenance of these pieces. And there's great outlines that we follow that are provided by the State of Kansas Creative Arts Industries, and also the City of Salina Community Art and Design Public Art Protocols. What it'll come down to is that Arts and Humanities will assume responsibility for the murals that are on city property, and the private property owners will assume responsibility for maintaining the artwork that's on their property.
I might also mention, because this question has come up, but for instance, some of the care and maintenance instructions, the practice that follows, is just informing a business of how to communicate with an artist if their work is deteriorating, or if you do want to take it out or paint over it or commission another work in the future. There's just some courteous things that you can do to talk to and respect another artist. It doesn't mean that they have to go out and touch it up every year, or that it stays as pristine in year one, just like painting a building, you know, at a given time. Paint deteriorates, it chips and peels, and that may happen before a building owner is inclined, or the peer pressure, to get something changed. But the intent is to use good quality products and have these last as long as they can, and depending on what the rain does, what the sun does, or those that are facing a direct south wall, deteriorate faster than those that are on a north wall. Those kinds of things all are subject to change. And so Joan, our staff, and then what the building owners will have and SDI will have are guidelines for how to have a healthy conversation when those decisions are made.
What do they do to preserve the piece? Do they seal it when they're done and then go back over and? Or is it just-
Some of that, I think, depends on the material. In most cases, they're using, well, and Joan can speak to these artists, but for instance, the example she gave of Gear's piece in the alley between Santa Fe and 7th Street was spray paint on a stuccoed wall. There was no ceiling, there was no touch-up, there was no protective coating or UV protection, and there probably isn't for these.
think so.
And so, depending on the product, a good exterior masonry-based latex paint, for instance, depending on the color, orange fades faster than blue does. And so all of those are variables, but the cost to put a UV protection or make them permanent is probably not worth the investment or the time. So.
Well, and that's why the priming and prepping is so important. That'll add a lot to the durability of the murals. So that's been done, and I think the groundwork is laid for, you think you can count on a good 10 years if the priming and the prepping and the good quality paint was used. If it was done right, you've got at least that, maybe more.
Well, I mean, as an example, Dave Lowenstein's, that was a north-facing wall under the shelter, the cover of Campbell Plaza, was about as pristine as the day it went up. It never had direct sun and it never had water on it. And so its condition was impeccable. And so, it's very possible that those that are sheltered and covered and not in direct sun or subject to water will last longer than that. So, Joan, as part of her responsibilities with our public art collection, she and the Community Art and Design Advisory Committee have the annual care and maintenance and prioritization of things that are either deteriorating, needing clean, needing replaced, anticipating more significant care and maintenance, and you provide that in your annual budget accommodation to us to kind of keep up with the public collection at its current size. So we would be anticipating the need for replacement of something probably a couple of years in advance, and cost-wise, we could make that determination then whether we had it in the budget or whether we would secure additional grant funding or whether we would ask for some capital improvement or sub-CIP dollars to help replace that at that time.
Basic timeline. In a nutshell, we are looking at having both the alley murals as well as the Santa Fe and Ash stage will be complete or very close to complete in that first week of May. And then the Santa Fe and Ash the first week of May, and then May 20 and 21, the alley murals will be done. And somewhere right along in there, Eric will be working on design and development of the Campbell Plaza stage and then moving forward from there. So just a quick benefits overview. Community building it creates this kind of public art, and community public art creates shared experience and community pride. Economic impact makes people want to visit and then keeps their attention so they'll come back and bring their friends and family. It'll be a model for future projects, and it will be a local response to the large-scale private initiatives of the Canvas project and in partnership with them. It'll have an immediate positive visual impact for the Stiefel and symphony performers and attendees, and provide interactive public art making experiences such as painting the festival trash cans. there really are a lot of positive impacts of this Make a Mark program. One that I don't think I've mentioned yet that I wanted to be sure and call your attention to is that the public art, not the public, but public art in general, is by its very nature inclusive. It is art for everyone to enjoy. And that's, to me, a lot of what makes it really special. It's a great way to let everyone see the artistic and artistic energy of the community reflected outwardly, not just inside of galleries or museums or performance halls. It's really for everyone, and that's a beautiful thing about public art. And so, in essence, Make a Mark will directly involve local and regional artists in public art opportunities and give Salina even more access to and ways to engage with public art projects. We'll want to have time for questions, I know, but Brad, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
A couple of things, Commissioners, and I'm not clairvoyant, I'm not Karnak the Great that is going to read you the answer to where we're going if you ever watched Johnny Carson. We are trying to the best of our ability and with the limited staff and time that we have to anticipate where our community is moving, in part from some lessons that we learned from Sculpture Tour Salina. We start a public art program that involves public funding, public participation and action, and then within a decade, partly because our community was transforming and we were celebrating art in a more outward and visible way, others said, we want to do that too. And Trey Mowry and Commissioner Hoppick and others who were on that Chamber of Commerce trip 12 or 13 years ago came back and said, you know, Salina could do this. And what that did was create a new opportunity for the public to engage downtown in a fresh way every year. It created kind of a sense of enthusiasm and pride. It improved the communication and how people related to art in public places by that action. Our office at the same time was trying to increase community awareness, not force people to like everything that was before them, but to make them aware of how some of those decisions were made, or that it's okay not to like something and you can have your favorites and not be wrong because your neighbor disagrees. And so with that being said, that I don't want to underestimate that or the power of that and why we're presenting to you what's happening today. This next decade, this next phase, and with the work by the Canvas Project by Travis Young and his team to bring artists together, not sure if you saw last Friday's 311 exclusive, and I think they're releasing it to other media later. They have a major mural festival coming to Salina that we just heard about in Rotary an hour and a half ago. That's going to involve 5 national and internationally known artists, a full 10-day or so festival of transforming some large-scale buildings around the community, and a documentarian that's world-renowned for her work in documenting street art and street artists over the last number of decades. One of the most respected voices in social documentary photography in that area is coming to Salina to document that event, and they're looking at it as a tourist attraction and an event at a scale that we're not used to out in the public. And in a relatively short time, much like the mill, we're going to transform pieces of the downtown, and they want to continue to do this. So that's their project, and I'm not here to just promote what they do, but I also have been talking to our staff ever since this emerged, and these conversations started pre-COVID, that when that happens, there will be private businesses, individuals, not just in downtown, but throughout the community that may say, I want a mural too. And so what Joan is going to be able to learn, and what our office will be better equipped to do by helping manage a project like the Artwork Alley Expo, is to provide groundwork for others to do the same. We have a successful solution, and people like what happens with the transformation of a trash corral. There's a few more downtown that need some attention that could benefit from similar actions, and we're going to learn along the way about how to scale that, how to appropriately budget it, how to train additional artists to do that, and then to build in care and maintenance and other things with it. But to further enhance our downtown, this project is going to be more than just painting on a wall. It's going to help shift a culture in our community, both for deeper understanding, appreciation, ownership, and engagement with art in public places. So we're hoping to be ahead of that curve just a little bit and provide good information to the public, and for us to be able to learn along the way to navigate what's a fairly ambitious project. So one additional thing, Joan, I might ask or have you share with commissioners is you may not have the date, but I believe there's another community engagement with Dave. Is that?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the date will be yet, but he is going to come back for another round. So, and everyone that came to the ones Friday and Saturday are anticipating an email from me inviting them and telling them when this next chance will be so they can continue what they started with Dave. And at that point, he would have he would start to have an idea of how it's shaping up and specific things that he can ask of the community. And it's just the next level of that engagement on the new stage wall. So that's coming up very soon because the whole thing is happening very soon, probably sometime in the next week or so.
The last thing I'd say before we open it up for questions is that all this obviously is subject to weather. So if it rains all one weekend, we've got a lot of scrambling to do. Some areas are better protected than others, and we're still waiting for the new stage wall to cure out so that it can be primed and ready for paint when the time comes. But we need 2 weeks or so for the masonry to cure, depending on temperature and weather and wind, of having that adequately dry before you put a sealant over it or before you put latex over it.
Well, and the weather may give us another community engagement opportunity, because if it's not completely done for May 6th, which we might kind of want it to be that case anyway, Dave will paint at the event. We're going to have that night for the first Friday event where we're going to have the band and food trucks. Even for that night, it'll be a fun party. And then people will get to see him paint and finish, and he'll offer paintbrushes to whoever comes, so that'll be fun too. Either way it works out.
Again, in the crystal ball a little bit, and I think, Dr. Davis, you were the one when an earlier presentation was made about the stages and their location and timing and wanting a space ready by a time specific. What we're seeing already, and Anna has been helping from our office with this as well, but that stage is booked from the first weekend of May into October, with multiple events through SDI and or Arts and Humanities, mostly SDI. But I think in the last week, there have been 2 or 3 additional calls by just citizens asking about the availability of that space and wanting to start to program. And for the downtown to remain vibrant, Ken Boone, who was one of the early consultants on the downtown project when 2020 did a master plan or a preliminary plan, said you can make this as pretty as you want with buildings and lights, but if you don't have programming, you're not going to have people. And so this is a variety of ways that programming can be added to enhance the downtown experience. And so With that, Joan, was there anything else you had before we see if there are any questions?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so.
Start. Commissioner Longbine.
The stage over here, what is the timeline for completion on that? When I parked, I seen they're still working.
Than I do.
That
Jim reported last week that the Santa Fe and Ash stage, yet to be named, we've called it about half a dozen different things, and nothing's sticking yet. We may get new opportunities here in the near future to think of what to call it, but the masonry is pretty well complete. There's some decorative masonry that's being done, some staining at the lower levels of the concrete where the plantings are going to go in the front of the stage. That's going to get stained with a dark stain. The top of the stage is going to be sealed. And again, I think there's been curing time. Now it's just weather and cleaning up the construction debris, but it will get a sealer to protect it from moisture and staining and other things that happens when Cokes get poured on it or somebody has their lunch. Electrical was being installed as well, and then there are some differences of opinion between some engineers and architects on how to finish attaching the roof to the frame of the stage. Because it's not mounted to a back wall, something different needed to be adjusted, and so they're working through those details. So that is not a direct answer to your question, but we're anticipating that most of the construction debris and everything, we're anticipating that weather permitting and that all the supplies are in on time, we'll start programming for that space in early May, or by May 1st, and then I think that was the extension.
Yeah, what I was going to offer for an answer is more contractual. The contract had two provisions in it. One is what's commonly referred to as substantial completion, and that was a March 1st target date. I did sign off on a change order on that, partially due to electrical material and supply issues, but the final completion date of May 1st didn't change, and I haven't heard anything to the contrary.
There'll be some planting that will still need to be done when that's complete to comply with the design review board or with what was lost in the parking lot when that was resurfaced, and a couple of islands were taken out there. We lost a couple of trees, so new trees are going to be added, those kinds of things, but that won't affect programming at that stage. So.
Well, overall, that project has progressed faster than anything I've seen lately.
It's exciting to see it.
Now, I guess I understand why they got this May 1st deadline for the big event. In my observations recently in other cities, I'm going to use Abilene and Clay Center for an example, that we're behind on this. And overall, from what I hear from people, just an example, the artwork on North 9th and South 9th, that gets a pretty steady thumbs down from people. But these murals, everybody likes them. It brings things out. And I like them, and I like what you're doing. And it's being done with minimal cost, it seems. So I look forward to seeing it and seeing it all transpire and progress. Because I know some of the old murals that have been uncovered over the years, like down here on 7th Street and inside Sharps, people just mesmerized by it. So yeah, thank you for putting this together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Ryan.
Oh, we got lots of time, don't we? The thought that's in the back of my head that really probably not useful, I think the project's great, and I'm glad that it's so ambitious, and I think you got really good people contributing to it, so you're going to get a really good quality. of products in these various places. But I don't know, I'm wondering, is there a place for art? Art should evolve, and it does evolve, whether we want it to or not. So we paint up everything now. What are my grandkids really going to want this art that we brought out? Is there any thought put to that kind of thing, that once it's all painted, are we changing these things? Or we keep them because they're historical?
No, I don't think in the same scope of preserve and protect forever that's not what a lot of the artists' expectations are. There are cities that have a concept called a shared wall, where certain areas of their downtown or on public or private buildings, they say, we're dividing this building up, much like Joan has divided the buildings, or Brady has next to the Stiefel. And there's just an understanding that every year, every 2 years, sometimes every 6 months, depending on what the wall is and its capability and what the budgets are, that a new artist comes in and paints over it. So the short answer regarding your grandchildren is hopefully they'll be painting it someday, and we'll put them to work. And I think that this has the potential to inspire a regular transformation of spaces as things age out and people's tastes change and paint peels. To say there's, Commissioner Hoppick spent quite a bit of money restoring 2 of the murals that were discovered when the building adjacent to his came down, but that was to preserve a historic icon or advertisement that was far more expensive than what most of these murals are. So those are 2 different things. And as an example, the Lone Ranger that Joan showed, we have all the artists paint for that, and as necessary, we either commission the artist to come back and touch it up, or we pay somebody to go in and take care of it so that it prolongs its life. Normally, a south-facing wall on a masonry surface like that, the previous one was 15 to 20 years old, I think, by the time we sanded it and had it repainted with a new image. But that was partly because we took the time to do that every year. With the budget of these artists and the expectation, there isn't that in place. There isn't that expectation. So,
Sorry for the lame question, but
no, it's a good question.
You've got a great.
It's a good question, and I hope that this mural movement continually transforms, and so that there are fresh and new things to see all the time. Both new ones going up, but then also old ones getting reconceived. So,
Well, it's exciting. The city of Philadelphia took off with murals, and they've got some gorgeous ones.
Atlanta's amazing.
Not really a question, more of an observation or a comment. To me, it's just very impressive for the amount of money being spent, just the visual impact and the amount or the scope of the area that the work is being done. I mean, it's just, to me, it's a win, and I think bang for the tax dollar, it's there.
well, our time as a staff, and both Joan and Anna and I have been working when there isn't a festival 60 days away. We're trying to better define what our role is as a resource partner in the community, because there are new and creative ways that people are asking us to engage, or ideas that they have, and so we're trying to better kind of determine what's our capacity and what's our role in responding to the public. It'd be great to say yes to everything, but that requires both time and personnel and budget. And so being able to work on a project like this where there's mutual benefits and pulling together, we did conceive a lot of this, but we're really just the glue for all of those other pieces to come in. And I told the city manager last week, and I hope this is a good thing for you to hear this, but I found out 2 weeks ago, we are the only city in the state with a standalone Department of Arts and Culture as part of city government. All of the other municipalities that have departments of arts and culture, they reside. Wichita's resides under the city manager's office. And Mike probably doesn't want you to
That's a full
give us
approach
the-
right there, I can
Yeah.
tell you. I'm colorblind to start.
Yeah, don't give us to him. No. And then many reside within a Parks and Rec department, or are given, the city will give money to an outside commission to manage it, but it isn't part of the department. Being able to be in this capacity, we wouldn't be able to do what you're seeing today without that level of support and direction and professional staff. So we don't take that for granted.
I am curious, as this ramps up, do you foresee more public involvement in terms of donations and interest? Or is that just hard to predict?
That's a great question. I think that when people can see themselves in the community and not feel like it's just one voice screaming, Joan made the point that the best thing about public art is that word public. There's no filter. It's not a private permission, and you don't have to have a membership. You just get to stand there and like it or not. But you're the only curator. And when that happens, I think people's personal value, appreciation, and engagement with that improves. And with that, when you build those bridges, it makes it easier to ask for money. And I should segue briefly. I put a catalog in front of each of you. That's a new document that we just created this year to help grow our endowment. We're working on, a multi-year $10 million endowment that would generate, a $10 million endowment would generate most of our programming budget for arts and humanities. And I think we can get there. Won't be in my watch, likely, but we'll get there. And so, yes, I strongly believe that there is both the capacity and the interest in this community with our history and with what we've demonstrated through the symphony and the community theater and the Salina Arts Center and the zoo and the car museum and all of the other entities that help make up cultural Salina. Yeah, we have that capacity.
Commissioner.
First of all, I want to agree with Commissioner Longbine that I love the project. I think it's really cool. But I'm going to warn Commissioner Longbine that you are now entering the world of art, and not everybody's going to love it. Brad and I laugh about what we do, that we lose a friend every year we put something up they don't like at Sculpture Tour. So it's kind of a joke. As much as we may love it, somebody's not going to like one of the murals, and somebody's going to tell you about it. But I think all in all, we're doing the right thing. You're exactly 100% correct. I like this project. It reminds me a lot of Sculpture Tour, that, it's kind of a two-pronged deal. It's to bring art to the community, but it's also an economic development tool, to get people downtown and stuff. And so I think this will help bring more people. And when the big mural, the other project, gets to go, and it's going to bring people into the community, and all those things are good for us. And so I'm excited about it. And I, as Brad mentioned, I redid my Bull Durham on the side of my wall, and it's amazing. And the reason I want to do that is we get a lot of out-of-state traffic down at Cozy Inn, and it's amazing how many times I'll see somebody taking a picture of it, or somebody will have their old car out there and taking a picture in front of it. So again, it's just a way to enhance the community. So I'm excited for it, and appreciate the work. And what another great example of private-public partnership. I mean, if we're spending $3,000 as a community and we get this much art, we do it all the time for that cost, I would think. So thank you, guys.
That is truly the sign of a healthy community, when the community is helping you fulfill your mission. That's a sign that there's trust and ownership and engagement. And I never take that for granted because we haven't always had that. And so when the generosity and the pride and ownership of putting art in public places takes place, it happens. We're all better, and we're getting far more done than what we could ever manage as a staff. So it's a good thing.
Just sort of, well, it's not really related to this project, but and I say we collectively, all the agencies in the room, are we going to take a proactive approach to get a name for this new stage, or are we going to be receptive and see? And if there's trade secrets out there you don't want to mention, just say not a good day to talk about it, and we'll move on.
I think there's conversation to be had in the very near future.
We'll move on. All right.
I think there's some ideas cooking that they may want to approach you about.
We will move on. All right, thank you. There is one more canvas that hasn't been, and you may have plans for this too, but that North Salina water tower,
Oh, yeah.
it's at night. I mean, put electric lights or late, I mean, possibilities are, but it just stands up there. I mean, you can see it from anywhere.
That sounds fun.
Martha has asked, I think once or twice in my time, is there something you want painted? Because we're commissioning, something, and we have a certain limit of what we could offer or do. And we haven't taken her up on it, but with the durability, cost, and maintenance of doing something with light, I'd much rather have Joan and the Community Art and Design group take that on and see what we could do. Because light seems to be becoming an equally transformative element downtown, and the street design and the signage and the overhead structures and some other things that I know are coming. I think light could be a viable material.
And in the 60s, we would have got some fluorescent paint, some black lights, and suspend that thing in the air. But
I love that.
hey, those were it was a good decade.
They called that the House of Sight and Sound.
Right.
Oh, we'll get to work on that right away.
We're collectively showing our age between Johnny Carson and
Yeah,
House of
yeah,
Sight
I
and Sound.
blew it twice. Commissioners, if you visit with any citizens that would like to be engaged or learn more about the process, it's open door. Our meetings, and both for the Arts Commission and Community Art and Design, are open to the public, and we welcome feedback and participation. And I'm pleased with the number of people. Joan was able to get out with Dave. He did a fabulous job of asking them some questions, not giving them his vision. He comes as a blank slate. He just provides an avenue or a vehicle, and as a matter of fact, he stayed at our house on Friday night, and Saturday morning he changed what he talked to the group about, or the Saturday afternoon, because we'd left a map of the city on there, and he noticed that the map that was in there didn't even have the river in it. It had the main streets, but the river wasn't there. And he said, I think you're going to be getting a river, and that may be more important in the future. But anyway, he asked the citizens to engage with their memories and thoughts about using the map as a beginning place of where that is. And that's just one example of many of how he successfully engages the community and lets them truly help shape what you're going to see in a few weeks. So,
Well, thank you both for coming, and we will meet at 4 o'clock.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Right, welcome to the April 4th, 2022 Salina City Commission meeting. Ask the city clerk if the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Right, may I have roll call, please?
Mayor Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Linkowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Longbine,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
If you can, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Nice to see folks sitting on both sides of the room tonight. That's good. We will start with awards and proclamations.
Item 3.1, recognition of the month of April 2022 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in the city of Salina. Laura Kermer, CAPS Community Engagement Coordinator, will read the proclamation.
Do you have to stand with me? I'm Laura Kermer, CAPS Community Engagement Coordinator, and I have representatives of BACA, Bikers Against Child Abuse, who would like to stand with me.
Thank you.
Whereas we are living in a time when disclosures of sexual abuse and harassment are becoming mainstream, child sexual abuse still lives in secrecy and shame. And whereas children have a right to be safe and to be provided an opportunity to thrive, learn, and grow. And whereas child abuse and neglect can be prevented by supporting and strengthening Saline County families, thus preventing the far-reaching effects of maltreatment, providing the opportunity for children to develop healthy, trusting family bonds, and consequently building the foundations of communities. And whereas by providing safe, stable, and nurturing relationships for our children, free of violence, abuse, and neglect, we can ensure that Saline County's children will grow to their full potential as the next generation of leaders, helping to secure the future of this state and nation. And whereas there were 1,089 cases of child abuse and neglect investigated by the Department of Children and Families in Saline County in 2021, a 21.27% increase over the last year. And whereas Child Advocacy and Parenting Services, Inc., also known as CAPS, provides both prevention and intervention programs designed to reduce risk factors associated with child abuse and neglect while focusing on educating parents and empowering children. And whereas CAPS conducted forensic interviews for 224 child victims of abuse or neglect and/or witness to a violent crime in 2021. Those victims also received professional advocacy, a medical exam and care by trained sexual assault nurse examiner on the sexual assault response team, referral to trauma-focused mental health services, and follow-up supports. These services are delivered through a multidisciplinary collaboration between the City of Salina and Saline County Law Enforcement, CAPS, Salina Regional Health Center, Department of Children and Families Child Protective Custody, Saline County Attorney's Office, Central Kansas Mental Health Center, and private therapists trained to use trauma-focused practices. And whereas CAPS began as a child abuse prevention coalition in 1978, the agency has a vision of a place where every child is safe, healthy, and strong. CAPS hopes to shine a light on abuse to create awareness and increase support through the following public events. Go Blue Salina Denim Days. Businesses are encouraging employees to wear blue jeans and/or royal blue, can collect funds for CAPS, and spread awareness by taking photos of employees showing their blue support. Each participant will get a sticker to wear showing they believe every child should be safe and loved. Shine a light for survivors. Citizens are encouraged to turn their porches, lamps, or room in their home blue during the month of April to light the way for child sexual abuse victims and help them shine. Blue light bulbs are available for purchase at CAPS. And Pinwheels for Prevention, a roaming pinwheel garden that is spread via donations from individuals who wish to plant the garden in their yard to show they believe in creating spaces where every child is safe, healthy, and strong. Pinwheel planters are available for businesses for their lobbies or windows. Information about the gardens and planters can be found at capsofsalina.org. Therefore, I, Dr. Trent W. Davis, Mayor of the City of Salina, Saline County, Kansas,
do hereby proclaim April 2022 as Child Abuse Prevention Month and encourage our citizens to lift up a child's voice.
Thank you. Are the denim days just for April, or is that ongoing?
We encourage them in April because blue is the color of Child Abuse Prevention Month, but we would love to see it going all year long.
Thank you. And could you, and I did not write your name down, I apologize, but could you tell us a little bit about the organization?
So we go by road names. My name is Taterbug. I'm the child liaison for our chapter. Most of our group is right here in the Salina area. BACA is a worldwide organization who we all are volunteers. We all come from all different walks of life. For example, I'm a nurse full-time. And more or less, our whole mission is to empower abused children. And we work alongside other organizations.
Thank you. Well, I could probably get both of you to come up front to have your picture taken and get your signed certificate. Figure out a way. There's the camera.
All right.
Okay. Okay.
One more.
And as a gift from CAPS, we would like to present these commemorative pens and Go Blue stickers for the commission.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
This is a very informative information on the proclamation. There's no excuse for anyone to not know where to send money or get the pinwheels. Huh? Okay. We will now move to 3.2.
Item 3.2, recognition of the month of April 2022 as Fair Housing Month in the city of Salina. John Burchell, Human Relations Commission Chair, will read the proclamation.
Mr. Burchell, hi.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, it is my privilege to be the chair of the Human Relations Commission for the city of Salina and to read to you this proclamation. Whereas the fight for fair housing has been more than 50 years in the making since the passage of the Fair Housing Act as part of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. And whereas the act enunciates a national policy of fair housing for all who live in the United States without regard to race, color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, or disability. And whereas the city of Salina is committed to the mission and intent of Congress to provide fair and equal housing opportunities for all citizens. The principle of fair housing is not only national law and policy, but is enforced locally under Chapter 13 of Salina City Code. And whereas we celebrate the strides that have been made to remove barriers to fair housing and acknowledge that acts of housing discrimination are repugnant to a common sense of decency and fairness. And recognize that as a city and a nation, we still have much work to do. Now, therefore, I, Trent W. Davis, MD, Mayor of the City of Salina, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2022 Fair Housing Month and encourage the people of Salina to learn more about their rights and responsibilities under the Fair Housing Act and the Kansas Residential Landlord and Tenant Act as we collectively fight housing discrimination within our great community.
Thank you, Bart. Hearing my name in that nice voice there makes me feel real good there. I know the Human Relations Commission throughout the year will go to various events around town and give information about fair housing and complaint process.
Well, not only that, but this month, April 22nd, Friday, we'll be hosting a day-long program open to a variety of people for those attorneys in the House that might be looking for some CEUs, social workers, but also general citizenry about fair housing and all those issues around there, including the Landlord-Tenant Act.
All right, and is there information There's a website that a person could go to see if indeed they have a problem that
Yes,
can help
through
them
the,
with.
through the City Human Relations website, you'll find a variety of links. And I might add, Mr. Mayor, being chair of the commission, it's pretty easy when you have such quality staff working. And I want to acknowledge to you and the rest of the commission that it really makes our job easier when we have such a responsive, you have such a responsive city staff helping us. Makes our job a lot easier.
Well, that's good to know, considering we'll be looking at our pay plan soon. Huh? Okay. The money is being well spent.
Yes, sir, it certainly is.
Right. Please come forward, Professor, and I'll give you a copy of the proclamation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
As we have no public hearings, we will move to the consent agenda.
Item 5.1, approve the minutes of March 28, 2022.
It's no shorter than that, okay?
Mayor, I move we approve the minutes of March 28, 2022.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of March 28, 2022. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And we may go straight to 6.1.
Item 6.1, approve ordinance number 22-11103 on second reading, unconditionally approving the issuance of general obligation bonds by the Salina Airport Authority for the purpose of financing the cost of certain capital improvements located at the Salina Regional Airport and Airport Industrial Center.
Thank you. There been any changes?
Not to my knowledge. I know Debbie Pax here on behalf of the city, and Shelley Swanson with the Airport Authority is online as well, if you
No
have any
changes?
questions.
All right. And there've been no comments received from the public since then. Is there any action the commission might wish to take?
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 22-11103 on second reading.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve on second reading ordinance 22-11103. We have roll call, please.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Aye.
Commissioner Linkowitz,
Aye.
Commissioner Longbine,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Davis.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0, and we will move to 6.2.
Item 6.2, authorize sale of general obligation internal improvement bonds, Series 2022-A. 6.2A, receive report on bids received on sale of bonds. 6.2B, approve ordinance number 22-11102 on second reading, authorizing the issuance and delivery of $8,195,000 principal amount of general obligation internal improvement bonds, Series 2022A. And 6.2C, approve resolution number 22-8041, prescribing the form and details of and authorizing the delivery of $8,195,000 principal amount of general obligation internal improvement bonds, Series 2022A.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Debbie Pack, Director of Finance. On March 22nd, City Commission approved resolution number 22-8029, which authorized us to offer for public sale general obligation bonds. From that time, we've distributed our preliminary official statement and notice of sale to prospective bidders. That bid process happened today. It closed at noon Central Daylight Time. Since that time, we also had a Moody's rating that was presented to us on March 25th. The city's rating was confirmed at AA3. As I said, the bid deadline was today. It's normally put into consideration the same day as the City Commission so that you can formally accept those bids. I have Dave Arterberry from Stifel Nicholas here to give you the bid results. I also have Mitch Walters from Gilmore and Bell in case we have questions about the particular bonds themselves. And then after that presentation, I'll go through the action items with you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon. David Arterberry with Stifel Nicholas. As Debbie mentioned, today bids were received for the city's Series 2022A general obligation bonds. Bids were received up until noon. We gathered in the conference room over by Debbie's office and pulled up the bidding site to see the bids arrive. And I'm pleased to report that we got a total of 11 different bids for the purchase of the bonds. And to give you some perspective, last year, the city conducted a couple of bond sales, and at each of those sales, we got 8 bids. So I was pleased to see us get even more bids than last year, especially considering how volatile the bond market has been over the last few months. Of those bids, the best bid, in other words, the bid that was offering the lowest interest rates on the bonds, was submitted by Country Club Bank. And they wanted me to make sure to mention that their bid was in association with Plain State Bank, so they were together in a group. Their true interest cost on their bids was 2.607853%. We reviewed the bid. It met all of the bidding parameters. It was mathematically accurate, and they provided the necessary good faith deposit. So I see no reason that you wouldn't want to accept this bid and proceed with it. To give you just a little more perspective, again, in terms of the interest rate, I mentioned that the market's been pretty volatile, and as you probably or may be aware, interest rates have increased pretty significantly over the last 3 or 4 months. Interest rates this time last year, when the city sold a similarly structured and rated bond issue, the rate you got then was at 1.63%. Today it was at 2.6%. Over that same period of time, the municipal bond AAA index increased about 1.15%. So the change in the rates between last year and this year on your bond sale is very consistent with what the overall market has done. So, but in summary, a nice result, a lot of good bids, and I was pleased to see, given the market, this many bids. So.
Right. Any questions?
What are the maturity on those?
There's maturities from 1 year to 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the difference between the low bid and the high bid? Just curiosity.
Let's see, the next highest bid, the next low bid was, I believe, 2.63. I think the high bid, I didn't print it out, but I believe it was about 2.84, somewhere in that range. Okay. Yep.
All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And just a reminder, these bonds will pay off the 2021 temporary notes, which mature on May 1st, 2021, and will cover multiple projects: 9th Street Bridge, Smoky Hill River renewal design, sanitation trucks, TPEC HVAC, and 3 special assessment districts: Magnolia Hills Estates 2, Stone Lake Phase 3A, and the Markley Trail project. And the debt service from these issuance will be coming from property tax, sanitation fund, or special assessments. So we have 2 action items before you today. The first is to approve on second reading of ordinance number 221102, authorizing the issuance and delivery of the bonds. You can approve that with amendments. You could postpone consideration or vote to deny that. The second action is to approve resolution 228041, which prescribes the form and the detail of the authorized of the bond, the general obligation bonds that were presented today. You could approve that with amendments, postpone that consideration, or vote to deny. Staff recommends option 1 in both of those action items. And like I said, I do have Gilmore and Bell is also here if you have any questions about the bonds or the markets or how it's set up. So,
Thank you. Any questions, concerns? Any public comment?
The only comment I have, and it doesn't deal with these, is, we were very fortunate to refinance several bond issues over the last year or two, and it looks very prudent based on where interest rates are. So we were lucky we were able to do that at that time. So.
Good point. All right. Any action to be taken?
With that, Mayor Davis, I move we approve ordinance number 22-11102 on second reading, authorizing the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $8,195,000, subject to change, principal amount of general obligation internal improvement bonds series 2022-A.
Second.
Okay. Been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 22-11102. on second reading. This would need to be roll call.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Aye.
Commissioner Linkowitz,
Aye.
Commissioner Longbine,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Davis.
Aye, that passes 5-0. Any action on 6.2C?
Mayor Davis, I move we approve resolution number 22-8041, prescribing the form and details of and authorizing the delivery of $8,195,000 principal amount of general obligation internal improvement bonds, Series 2022-A.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? No. All right, all, it's been moved and seconded to approve resolution number 22-8041. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And thank you, gentlemen, for making the trip to come see us. Item 6.3.
Item 6.3, approve resolution number 22-8042 and authorize the city manager to execute a management agreement with Salina Tennis Alliance relating to the operation of the Salina Tennis facility.
Mr. Hammond, how you doing?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Jeff Hammond, Director of Parks and Recreation. Over the course of time, we've had several conversations with you regarding tennis. Wanted to give a quick overview of how we got here. The Salina Parks and Recreation Master Plan was adopted in July of 2018. It addressed the poor conditions of our existing tennis courts and the need for repair, replacement, or abandonment of those courts. The master plan also provided a design concept for a tennis facility at Kenwood Park at the former Salina Municipal Pool Facility. In that same year, Salina Net Generation, as it was known at the time, provided City Commission with a presentation regarding a future tennis complex at Kenwood Park. November 2020, the City Commission declared all areas of Kenwood Park, all areas of the former municipal swimming pool and the rodeo grounds as eligible for naming rights for Salina Net Generation to start the process of the municipal naming guidelines. In response to the tennis proposal by Salina Net Generation, the City Commission adopted Resolution 21-7937 on March 1st of 2021 to express the intent of the governing body for the purpose of enhancing tennis in the tennis experience in the Salina area, in the city of Salina. Additionally, on January 24th of this year, City Commission approved the final naming rights initiative by Salina Tennis Alliance and recognized the fundraising efforts that were tied to the naming rights initiative for the purpose of construction of a future tennis complex. The Salina Tennis Alliance funded process was to plan, design, and construct a tennis facility at Kenwood Park. They started with preparing design documents, which were reviewed and approved by city staff. Those design documents were initiated by Salina Tennis Alliance and paid for by Salina Tennis Alliance. Competitive bids were solicited by Salina Tennis Alliance at their expense based upon an agreed upon scope of work for a general contractor. The scope of work included 12 new tennis courts that were lit, a hitting wall, various concrete sidewalks, a shelter house, fencing improvements, gates, parking area on the north side, and a drop-off drive on the south side. Bids were opened on December 16th of 22, and the selected bid for construction from a competitive process was $2.2 million, just above $2.2 million awarded to Hutton Construction. There's some attached drawings in your packet that were updated recently from some site drawings. Construction of this facility started on March 21st, just recently. Additionally, at that January 24th meeting, there was a study session presentation provided by Salina Tennis Alliance for a proposed annual plan and operational model. After the presentation by Salina Tennis Alliance, the City Commission considered whether they wish for city staff to enter into an agreement for operations and maintenance with an outside organization to operate the facility, Secondly, the City Commission considered whether they wish to enter into direct negotiations with Salina Tennis Alliance or to conduct a request for a proposal process. The City Commission provided direction to staff at that time to enter into direct negotiations with Salina Tennis Alliance. Based on that direction, city staff has consistently met with representatives of STA or Salina Tennis Alliance to finalize those details of the proposed annual plan and proposed agreement, and both of which are in your packet today. Some of the provisions of the proposed annual plan are composed of several operating details, including a proposed budget, hours of operation, a programming plan, capital improvement requests if in the future, replacement of furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, fee structure, staffing plan, and who's responsible for what. As you will note in the annual plan, there's a contribution request of $40,000 from Salina Tennis Alliance. The contribution is in addition to other sources of revenue, including court fees, instructional classes, clinics, tournaments, leagues, retail sales, grants and donation, for a total budgeted revenue of $125,000. Per the agreement as well, the city contribution will be determined annually as part of the city budget process, with the future intent that the contribution from the city be minimized or potentially reduced or eliminated. The proposed annual plan will be subject to an annual joint review of operations, facility maintenance, programming, offerings, fees, and the city contribution. The proposal for the operating year and for each operating year after that, Salina Tennis Alliance will submit the proposed annual plan to the city by April 15th to prepare for our annual budget process. If the city has reasonable objections to the annual plan, STA and the city will engage in discussion and reasonable efforts to attempt to come to an agreement. The city will respond to Salina Tennis Alliance by June 1st of each year with any reasonable objections or approval of the proposed annual plan. The annual plan will take into consideration the priority of uses listed in your packet. The number one priority is public service programming, lessons, leagues, court play, as you will. Priority number two, USD 305 programming for practices and tournaments. Priority number three, Salina Tennis Alliance events that recognize funding efforts, leagues, and tournaments. Number four, Salina Tennis Alliance endorsed activities such as sponsored leagues and tournaments. And number five, reservations in general, individual, public use, not-for-profit tournaments. And number six, lastly, private for-profit events. It will be important to note that the proposed agreement with Salina Tennis Alliance would be the exclusive provider of these lessons, clinics, and all tennis instruction. Another provision of the proposed agreement requires that a replacement reserve fund is created and held by Salina Tennis Alliance. The revenues, including the city contribution, that exceed expenditures will be kept in this fund up to $30,000. This would be used for future improvements, fixtures, furniture, equipment, landscaping. Any excess funds greater than $30,000 will have a review. The first potential use of this would be to reduce the city contribution towards the operation of the facility. The second option, or the second review, would be the excess revenue over $30,000 would be to purchase youth equipment, provide scholarships, or provide discounted or free tennis services that would grow tennis in the community. A few additional provisions of the proposed agreement. The proposed agreement calls for an administrative responsibilities of the city, has a right to inspect and examine documents kept by Salina Tennis Alliance. The city will receive quarterly financial statements from STA and also a tennis court use schedule. The agreement allows for Salina Tennis Alliance to seek competitive bids for concessionaires and also allow them to seek service contracts for the maintenance and operation of their facility, of the facility. The city has agreed to assist in the mowing of the facility, and that map is available in the annual plan. And recently, Salina Tennis Alliance annual plan was reviewed by the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board on March 16th with a recommendation to approve the annual plan and operational model provided by STA. At this meeting, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board did make a recommendation to have a city-appointed member on the Salina Tennis Alliance Board of Directors. However, based on existing contractual relationships with the construction of this facility and this contractual relationship, we believe doing so would create conflicts of interest, such that it would not be a recommended approach or practice while these contractual relationships remain in effect. We have some items for you today to consider. Number one would be to approve Resolution 22-8042 and authorize the city manager to execute the attached agreement with Salina Tennis Alliance. Number two, approve Resolution 22-8042, authorize the city manager to execute the attached agreement with some amendments as the city commission deems appropriate. Number three, postpone consideration of the resolution and proposed agreement with Salina Tennis Alliance to a specified date or time. And number four, take no action at this time, resulting in not approving the resolution or entering into the agreement at this time. We'll stand for questions. And also, I want to make mention that there are several members of Salina Tennis Alliance here. If you wish to have them, give them an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, start with Commissioner Hoppick.
Not so much questions as comments.
Comments? All right, we'll take those two.
One of the things, I appreciate the fact that there's going to be quarterly financials. You did mention that there'll be a calendar of events or usage. One of the things I would ask is if there was some type of breakout that showed what were Park and Recs programs versus the Salina Tennis Alliance programs. I think that would be helpful for us as we move forward. As I said last time when we discussed this, if we're going to put this kind of money into a project, I want to see the facility used. And I do believe that the Salina Tennis Alliance group has a plan, and I think it can get this up and moving. I really don't believe that our Parks and Rec department has the staffing right now to do this program justice. So I'm for funding the $40,000. I think it's an annual agreement, which gives us the flexibility to look at it annually and see how we're doing, which I think is very important. And again, we build in there if we have excess dollars, how to apply those, and does actually, if they're successful, give us the chance as a city to reduce our funding amount on an annual basis. So I'd like to thank that group and thank Parks and Rec for, I know you've put a lot of work into this too, so appreciate everything.
Okay, Commissioner Unklint.
I agree with Commissioner Hoppick. And I have a feeling that the longer this agreement goes, the better off it's going to be in terms of, if we're looking back, 10 years from now. I think in terms of the level of maintenance and how the place is managed, I think it's going to be a good decision now. It's going to be a great decision 10 years ago looking back, or 10 years from now looking back. Thank you.
Commissioner Ryan.
Commissioner Hoppick pretty much summed it up. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I certainly think that the Tennis Alliance can manage this far better than Parks and Recs would, and thank you all for all of the work you've put into it. Thank you.
Commissioner Longbine.
On my way to the meeting, I drove by there and was pleased that dirt work was actively getting done. Is the timeline of the project still August 1st?
To my knowledge, that's and I think they still are speaking to end of July, but if they get an opportunity to speak, I'm sure they'll give you more detail than I. But as far as I know, the end of July, 1st of August is the timeline they were shooting to finish.
Okay. Within the agreement, who's going to carry the insurance and the liability on this facility?
we've got the general and they've got
Yeah,
some
the,
specific.
we'll continue to carry insurance as a city-owned property, but there is a provision where they indemnify us and carry insurance at the levels that we typically require of someone that we enter into a contract. So kind of depends on the nature of the liability, but as a first requirement, they have to indemnify us.
Say,
and then-
say a storm blows all the nets down.
The property damage would be us. If there's liability type things, and that their indemnification would cover us.
Okay. And will there be sales tax collected on all the services?
And it'll be subject to sales tax like
Yeah.
in any other operation.
Any retail sale certainly would be subject to sales tax.
I think one of the issues I had was the exclusive lessons agreement. Will there be sales tax collected on the lessons?
If I can give you a comparison, when we have lessons or we have classes for Parks and Rec programming, there's not sales tax on those items.
Okay.
Like for a day pass at Kenwood Cove, there's not a sales tax on a day pass. There's not a sales tax on a court rental or any rental that we do.
It wouldn't be on the court rental. It'd primarily be sales.
Right.
Okay.
Retail sales for sure.
Okay.
Just had a few questions. So how would tennis be listed under the Parks and Recs booklet? Would this be 100% handed over to STA, or would the kids still enroll through Parks and Recs but have their tennis class at this facility?
In the activity guide, we would give them an exclusive area of our document that we would use to help them advertise. However, what their registration model is would be outside of what our registration system.
So then they would not be going there as a Parks and Recs kid, so to speak?
Since they would be the exclusive provider of lessons and clinics at that facility, they would be the one registering them as well.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, there are prior examples of that approach where we don't necessarily provide the programming with Parks and Rec staff, but we strike a partnership with a provider, and then we'll include them in the Parks and Rec
In the guide.
publications.
All right. Three questions. And I have to use an extreme example. Let's just say there was $250,000 of excess revenue. All right. $30,000 has to go into the reserve fund for equipment. Is there any scenario in which the city's $40,000 contribution would be recouped that year, or would we simply take that information and use it in the following year's discussion?
If there were an unexpected windfall like that, no, I don't think there's a provision to recoup. It certainly would be part of the conversation going forward. The other thing that I would tell you is they are set up as a standalone not-for-profit, so whatever proceeds that they receive are what I would call inward-facing for the agreed-upon purposes. So even if we weren't in the picture anymore, they'd still have to use their funds for the stated purpose of the not-for-profit.
Okay. And I think I understand, but if I got confused, I'm hoping there's someone in town who got as confused as I was. What's the difference between priority number 1, public service programming, open court, and number 5, which is way down, individual reservations in general?
So number 1 and number 5.
Yep.
I believe number 5 has to do with rentals, court rentals.
So that would be,
And number 1 would be more instructional programming.
because on number 1 it says open court. Now, open court means you can just walk up if the court's available,
Right.
you can play.
Yes, they are committed to providing,
Right, so no lessons, no,
Right.
you're there, the court's available. Number 5 would be if you can only go on Thursday at 2 o'clock and you want to reserve a court specifically for that day and time, or is
whether
still
it's
no lessons, it's just you and your friend out there in court?
similar to how we do shelters. We do in park shelters, we have a first come, first served shelters. We have reservable shelters. Those reservable shelters don't require a reservation. However, if you do have a reservation, then you guarantee that shelter for yourself.
Okay. And is there any scenario in which the private, for-profit events would squeeze out any of the other priorities? If the for-profit events were booked months in advance?
That probably is the scenario. There will have to be a scheduling component to that. The best example I can give you is baseball, and they have a very elaborate way that everyone gets an opportunity to put forth their schedule and their reservations, and then the priority system gets applied and a calendar is put together. And if there's openings in that calendar, then you kind of on an ongoing basis can fill in those openings. But there definitely will need to be a point in time where all interested parties have their opportunity to indicate their interest. These priorities get applied to that calendar, and that won't necessarily fill up every available slot. And then you'll have to administer from that point forward for the rest of the season.
Right, because I could see someone wanting to plan an event for a year from now, which is good planning. The person who wants open player reservation doesn't know now that they want to go that day a year from now.
In the annual plan, in the schedule that they put together, there's an acknowledgement of the number of courts available for reservation and the number of courts left open for open play. So there is a hold on facilities just for the purpose of maintaining open play.
Right, but I'm assuming for a tournament, I would guess the entire facility would be.
Correct. Yeah, in the event of a tournament for that block of time, then the facility would be dedicated to that.
So there's some checks and balances to ensure that tournaments don't eventually squeeze out open play, which.
Well, the other thing I'd remind you is, in addition to this partnership, we were able to, USD 305 was very gracious in wanting to take over and upgrade the courts at Jerry Ivy. So their intention is to add courts there as well as upgrade the existing courts. Those are not part of this scheduling arrangement, and 4 of those courts are committed to remain open to the public. Again, that is subject to their practice schedule and their tournament schedule. But if the concern is a lot of tournament activity here, then there's a high likelihood that the courts at Jerry Ivy would remain open for public play.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Because I think this would, when I hear about the reservations, kind of reminds me a little bit of the Salina Municipal Golf Course. There's a lot of tournaments out there that may tee off at 8, and they have the course till 1 or 2, and there's no open play until that's over. So I'm guessing that reservations for tournaments would be somewhat similar.
Right. They're manipulating tee times to match what the tournament would be
Is there
done.
a cap on the number of tournaments?
We,
I mean, obviously, if you had one of those every week, then no one could ever just go out there at 8 o'clock in the morning and play.
Right. As part of the agreement, we haven't put any cap on that. If that becomes a problem, it'd be a good problem to have, but at that point, we may have to revisit. But the first thing I would look at is the availability of the Jerry Ivy courts while a tournament's going on at this complex.
Okay.
And just, I guess I did have one question I did forget to ask. When he talked about number 5 on the reservations, the Salina Tennis Alliance is responsible for all reservations on the courts, so that takes that completely away from Parks and Rec, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Now, the scholarship fund that we have in the city for kids who wouldn't otherwise be able to have lessons, will that, with the supervision of that money, still be through Parks and Recs, or does STA decide who can use those funds?
There would be 2 separate scholarship funds. We would still maintain a scholarship fund for Parks and Rec programming. And I believe the intent of the agreement and from Salina Tennis Alliance is to have a separate scholarship fund for the promotion of tennis.
So the fund we have currently now would not be used for tennis?
No. That would not be my intent to use those funds. Now, if they find themselves without a scholarship, possibly, but that's not a scenario we've discussed.
Yeah, I would never say never. I mean, there may be a scenario where we think it's meritorious for our scholarship funds to be used for tennis, but it would be at our discretion, separate and distinct from anything that Salina Tennis Alliance might be doing.
Right, so I'm just saying, so if a child registered at STA did not have the funds, their scholarship fund was empty at that point, could they come back to Parks and Rec, say, hey, will you sponsor me for my lessons over there?
Yeah, if that scenario arose, my interpretation would be we would treat that like any other scholarship application it would not be precluded from being funded with our scholarship funds.
Okay. All right. Just, if individuals were to donate to the city fund, is that a tax-deductible contribution?
I don't know the answer to that. And
Don't know.
I would-
believe
I would certainly think so. Generally, there is a separate basis for contributions to a public entity that makes those deductible.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't know the tax consequences of this either, but STA is a not-for-profit as well, so.
Okay. All right. I think that's all the questions I had. Any questions from the public?
I don't know if STA wants to, but we want to be sure to give them the opportunity if they'd like to address you.
You want them to address first?
I'm just reminding the mayor, so I'll defer to him.
Well, and I thought about going both ways, and the right brain spoke before the left brain did. If you think that there may be more information that you'll hear from them before you ask, or you may want to ask a question that you want them to answer, your choice.
Ben Wendell, Salina, possibly now, because this way they can answer if they want to. The city's going to be contributing $40,000 a year, negotiable annually. $125,000 budget has been told. We already know the city's going to take care of the insurance because it's public property. My question is, who are we on, is the city going to be on the hook, or the taxpayers, for water charges, bills, the electrical, and maintenance of the clubhouse and the restrooms? Because it said, he talked about that the SDA would be responsible for the maintenance of the courts, and the city's taking care of the mowing. Where do the other charges come in as far as budget or something that the city needs to take care of?
Very good question. Thank you. I don't know who wants to answer.
The buildings themselves are ours. You may recall that part of the agreement that we entered into was to upgrade them. They're the old municipal pool buildings. Some of them were not enclosed, and so we have budgeted and have underway improvements to what were kind of formerly the shower rooms, to turn them into restrooms. The internal space is pretty open and rough. It's not in a position to be used as a public space. If any improvements were going to be made to it, either that would have to be another fundraising initiative, or we as the city would have to choose to fund that. So, if the roof starts to leak, those type of things, as far as the buildings are concerned, I would envision that that's ours to maintain as part of our building holdings. The operation and maintenance on an ongoing basis, replacement of nets, maintenance of fences, those type of things are what we were referring to. As far as, I was trying to find the budget in the annual plan, but I believe kind of the more basic utilities are accounted for in that annual budget.
Well, actually, on page 7 of the
Yeah, thank you.
2022 annual plan.
Yeah, so
That I had seen.
in the expenses, you can see there's water and utilities specifically called out in the budget.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Is there a representative from Salina Tennis? Do you want to give any additional information or offer yourself up as, I was going to say target, but a receipt of questions? I'm sure if you build your residence at that podium, someone will come.
Sure.
find
So,
questions
thank
for
you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner. So the question is, how are we addressing that particular, the electric water?
I think we've answered that. It's really just an opportunity to talk about the project and.
Sure.
and,
No, I think we're delighted. As Commissioner mentioned, dirt is moving. We intend to have project done by August. There are some supply chain challenges that we're working with right now that could cause some delays. But other than that, things are right as planned. We continue to receive donations and support, and we're delighted to be where we're at, and I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to hit the ground running once the courts are ready to go. And we do. We have had several conversations with people and wanting to know, hey, what can we do to be involved at day one? So this is going to give us an opportunity to get that head start. So.
All right. Any other?
How many courts do we currently have at Oakdale?
8.
8.
Yeah.
Okay.
8 at Oakdale.
I was just, to Mr. Winholz, we currently have 8 courts at Oakdale and 4 at Jerry Ivy that we are paying for the electricity. So now we'll have 12 like we already had, but we will no longer be responsible for the electrical and stuff at the Jerry Ivy.
Correct. And their budget includes water and utilities as part of their expenses.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? You're in no danger of bumping up against tip-off. Okay. All right. No other anyone online? All right. Any action to be taken by the commission?
Mayor, I move we approve resolution number 228042 and authorize the city manager to execute the attached agreement with the Salina Tennis Alliance. And we had a new drafting of that at our place here.
Correct.
What's in the, so maybe I should say, including the new draft.
Yeah, I don't, if you'd like, Mr. Bankson can walk you through, there's just a couple of final edits to be made after the packet went out, and he can walk you through those.
Well, don't walk through the whole thing, but changes.
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, the Section 9.4, as you looked at the draft that went out in the packet, it still anticipated that that it would have an Exhibit C that would show that allocation of primarily the mowing responsibility between the city and the Salina Tennis Alliance. It was thought ultimately that would be best addressed in the annual plan, and maybe you noticed the diagram that addressed that allocation was included in the annual plan that was distributed as part of the packet. The only other change was we were able to finalize Section 14.14, and that simply had to do with clarifying lines of communication and authority as between the city and Salina Tennis Alliance on an ongoing basis.
Just for clarification, the mowing that the city will be doing is just large swaths of grass on the periphery of the property?
Yes, and maybe inside the fence line in some instances, but what we tried to do is identify what we could mow with large equipment without having to do detail work or use trimmers and smaller pieces of equipment, and leave the detail work to Salina Tennis Alliance.
Okay.
And part is why annual plan review of that might make more sense, is if facilities change, if they're able to add some courts, those type of things, that footprint might change.
Okay. Should the motion include the change in 9.4, or are we just going to assume that the amended?
Well, that would be fine. Mayor, I might suggest that possibly the motion simply refer to the version of the agreement as presented at today's meeting.
Right.
If that's satisfactory.
So moved.
Okay. And who seconded?
I'll second.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Second.
All right. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor, moved and approved, moved and seconded, Resolution 22-8042. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Mayor and Commissioners, it may go without saying, but it'd be remiss not to acknowledge that this is another example of what Salina is about. We are blessed with people stepping up to make things like this happen and contribute, not only finances, which is significant, but their time and their energy and their resources. And the members of the Salina Tennis Alliance have been great to work with. They've been at this for quite a while. It's a long day coming. So certainly appreciate the working relationship.
And weather should be good for your opening day. Right.
And they might get it built quicker than the city did the stage over on National.
Right.
Knock on wood. Supply chain is probably the biggest question.
All right, we will move on to 6.4.
Item 6.4, consider renewal of land lease for property located approximately Section 30, Township 14 South, Range 2 West in Saline County, Kansas, and bounded by the old and new channels of the Smoky Hill River.
Commissioners, Sean Hennessy, Assistant City Manager here. What this topic is, if you can bring up the map. This is in 1958, the city engaged in a number of efforts to control some of the flooding along the river. And one of those efforts was to straighten the river. I apologize if in your packet this is turned sideways, but if you could go to the other map. There we go. This just tries to give you a general location. This is a 17-acre parcel that was acquired in 1958 for those flood control purposes, just north of Magnolia. And so in 1965, then, the city started a lease with Mr. Tilburg on an annual basis at $70 a year for the 17-acre property. The land was originally acquired, as I said, for those flood control purposes. When the city manager asked me to look into this, when we received a request to purchase this property, and so I did some more of the research on this property. Like I said, it's 17 acres. It lies entirely within the floodplain, this property, and the access is relatively restricted just due to the location with the river and then the adjoining properties. Apparently, if you look at the northern boundary of the property, that was part of the line of the old river channel. And so what we've brought before you is basically just to get some guidance from the commission if they'd like to continue with the lease that Mr. Tilburg has had since 1965 at the same rate, or to adjust the rate, or to see if there's a separate lease. This is obviously a very long-term lease. Mr. Tilburg has been maintaining the land during this time and also farming on it. And so that's why we're here today, is really to get some guidance from the commission if they'd like to continue the lease or adjust the lease or see about leasing the property to someone else.
Any, should we hear from Mr. Tilburg? Excuse me, Mr. Tilburg?
You certainly can. I think we may have two interested parties here, Mr. Tilburg as well as Mr. Pessinger, that inquired about the opportunity to purchase the property. And I think that the staff report indicates his interest relates to operating it as a side farm for the Great Life Golf Course, which adjoins it. But if you'd like to hear from either one of them, that would be fine.
All right, and we will, well, yeah, come on up, then we can just do all of our questions at once.
I'm Cheryl Murray, and Arnold Tilburg is my father. I own and live on the property directly south of the city's parcel. And as you know, my dad has continuously farmed the land for the last 56 years and still actively farms today. I just wanted to give you a little bit of history and context. Back in 1965, George Phillips, the city's flood control supervisor, approached Arnold and asked him to farm the property. He indicated that it would be beneficial to the city not to have to maintain, patrol, or supervise the area. It is pretty remote and hidden location and ideal for illegal activities. We could tell you many stories over the years, from tearing up a literal weed patch, finding meth cooking operations, and also being threatened with litigation by an adjoining landowner because allegedly somebody had been shooting in the trees down there. So anyway, and still more often than we'd like, we do encounter people who trespass on the property. So this lease has not been without its headaches. It's been cost more than $70 a year. But nonetheless, we've always had a good relationship with the many different Elks and Great Life Golf Course superintendents over the years. We exchanged cell phone numbers. As I said, my husband and I and family live on the property just to the south, and we are down there, every day. If we need to get in touch with them, we have numbers. I don't have Mr. Pestinger's number, but I guess I'm remiss in that. But anyway, and we've even allowed the large well service repair trucks access over our property from Magnolia, as it's difficult for them to access the wells from Great Life because the road's not very improved and they would have to drive on the golf course. So anyway, and in addition to, we would like to continue, this particular lease. Like I said, we have an interest in making sure that people aren't down there that shouldn't be down there doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But one concern that I have, and it's not really my concern, I guess, but I'm not certain that Great Life will be able to grow the sod on the property as they have indicated they wish to do. I spoke to a representative in Topeka at the Kansas Department of Water Resources, and they indicated that they don't have enough acre feet to water both sod and fill the ponds to irrigate the course. And they said it would be difficult, if not impossible, his words, not mine, to get any more water rights on the Smoky Hill alluvial basin, as it has been heavily oversubscribed. Of course, that's not the city's problem, and you've maybe worked that out. But anyway, we would like to continue the relationship, and maybe with a reasonable increase in rent. And with us living there, certainly we're best equipped to, monitor and police the property and make sure nothing else happens down there. That's it.
I assume it's probably apparent, but we didn't have any concerns or complaints about their operation of the lease. It really was prompted by an interest from one adjoining property owner. Being a landlocked property, there weren't a lot of opportunities there. So at the point that we had that request, felt the sense of obligation to pursue it and bring it forward to you.
Right, so just for clarity's sake, Ms. Murray, your family would like to continue farming on the property? Okay.
Still farms.
Still farming, okay.
And once again, it's as much a security thing.
If you can come back up to the
It's as
podium.
much a security thing. There are so many people, like I said, we still encounter people who will come off the golf course, they'll find the path and they'll drive down and they'll, drink some beers and, whatever, it's not a problem. I could tell a few stories about encountering people while I was, when I was in better shape a few years ago, I would run along the river on our side of the, on our side of the river, and this huge guy emerges. I heard people talking, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And, thinking it was rafters or, because people kayak down the river. And this huge guy, he was probably 6'5", 350 pounds, and I thought, am I going to die today? I figured I could outrun him, but I didn't know who else was going to emerge. But anyway, he was from Sedgwick County, and he said, I said, what are you doing? And he said, we're just looking for a place to fish. And well, there's better places. Why don't you go, down to Billburg or something like that? And asked where he was from. And he said, we're from Wichita. Oh, okay. And I said, well, watch out for ticks. And he's like, what's that? So, yeah, I knew he was a fisherman. So, anyway, we just want to limit the access, and we're down there. So, and even though Great Life has access, and it's a limited access, still, things happen. So, anyway, thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, any questions, comments for staff or?
Not for staff.
No,
We're going
I
to hear
had
from
a-
Mr. Pestinger.
Question for, to access to your house, is that little road just past the bridge on Magnolia? Okay. Always wondered where that went.
Yeah, a lot of people do. They drive back there.
And that's how people get to this property?
Yes, although I was,
You have to come back up to the podium for a minute, thank you.
I talk loud. I'm told I talk too loud, so I didn't think I would need this. Yeah, we still have people. The other day we're putting in a garden down below, and I was down there trying to get some seeds in before it rained, and it was probably about 7:30, and there was some guy who was walking from the north, and I'm like, where did you come from? And he was kind of scruffy looking, so Oh, well, I was just trying to find my way across the bridge. I didn't know where I could get across. No, he'd been walking for a while, so.
And
Anyway.
what do you raise on the acreage?
There's brome planted now, yeah.
Okay, so it's just hay ground.
He's had wheat on it and milo over the years, but it's been in brome for several years.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Pestinger?
Hi, I'm Tom Pestinger, 5113 East North Street. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. First of all, I have the ultimate respect for the Tilburgs here. I mean, they've been great over the years and everything. And to be honest with you, the way this all come about is we were thinking about putting a sod farm down there because our wells are on the property and the electrical service coming into the property are on that property. And I don't know, it must have been, like you say, when they put the dike in, because the wells and everything were put in the 50s. The golf course has been there since the 30s. And to be honest with you, when I found out the city, I thought we owned the property. So, I mean, I was ignorant. I did not have it surveyed when we bought it. And I got to looking one day, and all of a sudden it said city. And I go, what the heck, city? How are our wells on the city property? But, and I didn't even know Tilburgs were leasing it until after I sent Mike a letter. And he said, well, we've got a lease on that property. And I said, okay. But my whole goal, like I said, is to put a sod farm on it. As far as the water, right now, the last 4 years, we've only used 60% of the water, or water rights. Matter of fact, when I called them in Pratt, they couldn't, they said they were shocked that we weren't using our entire water and everything. And if we can't put this together, I'm like I said, I'm fine with them farming it and everything. I was just, or maybe I could sublease it from them to try and put a sod farm or whatever. But, like I said, I'm not trying to stir anything. I was just trying to put in a sod farm because our main water lines and everything run from the river and the pumps, which are by the river, through the middle of the property that feed the golf course. And we were going to put another sod farm at a different location, and we just got to thinking, with the water lines and everything there, it would save us thousands and thousands of dollars if it would work. And Mr. Tilburg knows a lot more about whether that grass would grow down there than I do. But that's kind of where I'm at on it. And so.
How much of that 17 acres would you need to grow the turf that you need?
We would probably only do 4 or 5 acres of it to see.
And actually, I think it's only 7 acres.
That's what I thought.
Oh,
Have to come back up to the,
Still not loud enough, huh? I think it's only 7 acres that is cultivated. So of the rest is just the channel, the Dead River Channel and trees. So it is, I think the lease actually has 7 acres on it.
And just so the commission knows, not shockingly, the records from 1958 aren't always extremely clear, but it appears that the water rights were granted to the Elks Club when the straightening of the river occurred, because it curtailed their access to the river. So remember that channel there along the north? And then Mr. Pestinger kind of inherited them through his interest in the golf course now, which in the far past was the Elks Club. So it's not typical that and you'll see in your packet the letter which we were able to get from the state. It refers to why this happened as far as the Elks being granted these water rights, and then that transitioned when it became the Great Life Golf Course. So that's why Mr. Pestinger has water rights on land which is owned by the city and leased by someone else. Again, some of the vagaries of time. So.
Mr. Pestinger, are you interested in buying this? I mean, I don't see any reason the city should own it.
I originally approached Mike about buying it because, like I said, I didn't know Tilburgs were leasing it or anything. I thought, well, I'll just approach the city. And I heard that there's been some ground along the levee that has been sold over the years. And I approached Mike, and here we are today. So.
And I guess an answer to the obvious question there is, as we looked into that, somewhat the vagaries of time as well as the complexities of how that property was acquired, we didn't have a real straightforward legal answer on how to transfer ownership of that property. It was acquired by eminent domain as flood right-of-way, and so
So you're
we
saying we
didn't.
can't say it? We can't sell it?
I'm not going to say that we can't sell it, but we didn't put, I don't know that it would be all that fruitful for us, all the legal work that it would take to figure out how to sell it versus hold it as we are today, which is why we kind of headed down the path of do we want to entertain lease options. Again, it's also landlocked property, so we wouldn't be able to sell it on the open market to any interested developer. We'd be limited in what we could do.
If I could ask a question of the city manager and the city attorney, if Mr. Pestinger and,
Murray.
thank you. Well, actually, I remembered yours, but I couldn't remember your dad's. If they were to take a week or two to work something out, would we be able to postpone consideration of this for 3 weeks?
And I don't want to speak for either one of them, but I think at the end of the day, they're both interested in growing something on the same piece of ground. So I don't know the likelihood of working something out. I don't want to.
Oh, I can work with him on anything.
Well, and that was the whole thing. We
Yeah,
figured if we
if-
could just get a hold of you, then
Yeah.
we probably
If
could
I-
work something out.
If
because
I
we're
would have
boys.
known that they were leasing it, I would have approached you first.
Yeah.
And seen if the possibility, so.
Well, I don't want to preclude you from having that conversation.
So there's not any stipulation that says that whoever's leasing the property cannot sublet it?
Yes.
That's within the.
Well, there is a paragraph in there. It
In
says,
the current one.
Yeah, the
But they
part.
can amend that, anything can be.
It says the party of the second part shall not have the right to sublease the premise covered by this lease or any portion thereof without the written consent of the party of the first part, which would be us. So we
Right.
could allow that,
Yep.
Okay.
but we'd have to be a party to that, so.
We just want to be able to work together.
Oh, yeah.
That's, I mean, this has been a long.
And I think
Shift,
from being in the business, Mr. Pestinger had approached me a little bit about this piece of ground, and that's how I know that obviously you're glad to hear you have water rights and own the wells. That was a big concern when we first looked into this. And I guess I'm going to look at because I haven't done a lot of research on this, but as far as, this property being, sellable, there, as far as having marketable title, you have to go back to how you came, how you got the property. Does the party that had it originally have rights to it? Is there, there's certain things that are going to play into that if you were trying to sell it?
Well, and Greg, there was several years ago when the city tried to, went through this process and were trying to sell different parcels of land. And there, I don't recall all the specifics. We discussed briefly. I'm sure you've slept since then. And
Well, no,
there were some issues.
I recall what you're speaking of, and it was the looking into how the city had acquired and currently holds title, and that aspect of it having been acquired by eminent domain, and the interest acquired being of the nature of a, I think it's flood control right-of-way is the terminology. I'm looking to Mr. Hennessy to be sure I'm referring to that correctly. He's looked at all of that documentation more recently than I. But yes, that was virtually the same scenario. The question came up about potential sale. The
Because we were interested in buying it too years ago, and then it was just, I think this was too much of a headache, so
Yeah,
we'll just continue on.
The complexities of that are significant enough that it's yours to decide, not mine, obviously, but the prospect of continuing the the mutually beneficial aspects of it being used as it has, or similarly, along the line of what Mr. Pestinger has described. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm making a recommendation that's more of a policy question, but the opportunity to continue in a lease arrangement that satisfies their mutual interests, because frankly, I don't expect they have any competing interests. Here are the two folks that have the interest and the access. It would seem prudent to try to address those mutual interests. And I appreciate Commissioner Hoppick raising the point about the subletting, I was hesitant to suggest that that could be eliminated without making sure that was something you wanted to consider. But that is certainly an option as well.
I would prefer that if the other commissioners, I don't know how we deal with this, would allow the two parties to address this. It sounds like, I know 7 acres isn't going to make or break Mr. Tilburg's farming operation, I don't think. And they're concerned about the safety and if they can work something out. I'd prefer to allow them to do that. The one question I do have, just because it did mention in here about, a lease, how have we handled competitive bids before on a lease arrangement, just out of curiosity?
I'll let Mr. Hennessy start.
We currently have 3 other properties which are being leased that are either, at least in one case, it's another flood control property. I'm not sure of the status of the other 2. They're not nearly as old. The oldest one of those is from 1995. But I don't know as far as if there was ever any competitive process in the past. We're in the process, had several meetings of starting our land bank, which I think is going to be an important component. And so one of the goals in that, we've started to fine tune the policies and procedures, and we'll be bringing that to the commission, is figuring out which of these properties go in here, which don't go in here because of the status of the properties. But the short answer is I don't know what the competitive process was for those in the past. But I suspect, at least in several of those cases, it's again very limited in terms of the access to those properties.
Well, in this property, there would only be 2 individuals that would be bidding on the lease or the purchase, because for anybody else to buy it, they'd have to get an access agreement for one of these 2, and I don't see that happening. So,
or a boat.
Just guessing, So, what would, and again, I'm going to look at my fellow commissioners.
If I could offer a couple of observations just that relate to those comments. Now, there is a third property that adjoins this, but topographically, there's so much elevation fall from the veneer property on the north that we don't see that as practically having access. And I'm just working from memory, but there are a couple of examples of farm ground leases that we competitively bid. We'll enter into a 3 or 5 year agreement and have annual renewal provisions. But those typically are more accessible, where any interested party could bid, drive to the site, drive their equipment to the site, and readily access it from a road access point. So, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, if Ms. Murray and Mr. Pestinger are willing to discuss this and maybe come to city staff in the next couple weeks with an idea, how would we move this to a future discussion?
Well, I think you got a couple, if you wanted to postpone it to a date certain, we'd have to pick a date that we thought was reasonable for them to have their conversations and get back to us. Or if you want to take no action today, just knowing that once we hear back, we can certainly put it back on your agenda. Either one would work.
Postpone it 6 weeks?
Postpone it a month or 6 weeks?
I'd be for
Well, and I don't think there's any notice until, 60 days, so.
Right.
That's correct. The lease continues to February the 1st of next year.
No, it's
The
already-
current lease. It's an annual lease that rolls over
didn't
on an
know.
annual
So
basis.
That would give him time to figure out, just everything with respect to this sod farm situation.
So I guess we
Whether
should,
that's feasible and.
rather than figure out, for us to figure out what's best for the 2 of you, how much time? 2 months? 3?
You guys want to step into the hallway?
You could table it until later in the meeting.
Yeah.
How about May 16th?
I think we'll just drop it if we can.
So just take no action
Yeah,
at this
we'll
time?
We'll just work, my biggest concern after I open this can of worms, my biggest concern after I opened this can of worms was the
water.
security of the wells.
Yeah.
That's our, and we have had no problems, with getting them worked on or anything like that. And like I said, if I would have known it was under lease, I don't know that I would approach this. But I guess if you ever sell the property,
Call you.
then I definitely would like to be involved in that.
For my information, the main buildings of Great Life, they're in the city of Salina, is that correct?
Yes,
So
the
you're paying
buildings are,
sales tax to
but the
city?
land's not. none of the land's in, other than the buildings.
So sales tax is all generated there, right?
Yes.
So
And Mr.
looking out for the taxpayers.
Mr. Hennessy, I take it this is an unrecorded lease, because I don't think I saw that at the Register of Deeds, correct?
It's a lease. I've got a copy of it. I don't believe it has been recorded,
Okay.
no. So,
You know, maybe we should, you know, I don't have a problem just turning it off or anything, and maybe we should visit a little bit and make sure that's which direction we want to go, and that everybody's happy with it, so.
Sure.
Okay.
Well,
A couple weeks or whatever.
And then the interesting thing that we probably would not know the answer to, because everyone's probably passed by now, but, you know, way back, it was 1958 when the wells were set or
that's when
dug
the
or-
channels were adjusted,
Okay,
yes.
right,
Yeah.
right. And then they had the wells. Well, why at that time did the Elks not lease that property? Why was it offered to him? They obviously didn't want it.
I suspect what happened was the city took the property for, and again, this is speculation because the record's a little murky. They took the property because of the straightening of the channels.
Right.
But then they're like, oh, now there's an issue with the Elks not having the same access to water rights. And that's what the letter that's in the commissioner's packet, it
Right, I'm
obliquely.
just wondering why the Elks just say, yeah, I'll lease it for $70.
Yeah.
You know, big deal.
Yeah, I agree.
So-
I think the wells were drilled in 52. So, you know, I don't know who, that's what I would like to know, who owned the property in 52?
I was impressed with the paper trail he was able to put together. I'm not sure how much more history we're going to be able to cobble together.
But we
Okay,
both
well,
have an interest, obviously, you know, because we live there and he's
Yeah.
farmed it for so long and
Yeah.
lives, you know, right over there too.
And
You're going to be around for a while,
Yeah.
so it's not like, you know, management's going to be changing.
No,
I mean,
no.
as far as ownership changing, so I think we can.
So
work
if we're not going to move this to a
I
certain
think if you
date, we
choose to
just,
take no action today, nothing will happen. If they have a conversation and come back to staff and say, we have a scenario we'd like the commission to consider, we can put it back on your agenda in response to whatever they might bring to us.
It'll be sufficient to merely state that we're taking no action on item 6.4 today.
Yes, that will be fine.
Okay.
I guess the
Thank you.
question I have is, you know, the $70 a year, that's the lease of the century.
But you only have two people that can lease it, and I think $70 a year is fine.
oh, listen to you two, yeah.
I should be charging the city for some of the stuff stuff he's done.
You know, I just wonder, whatever way we go with this, if someone's going to be willing to pay fair market value.
But the thing of it is, when Mr. Phillips
Yeah, have to come up to the
come up to the microphone.
microphone there. And it's not that we can't hear you, but people on TV at home can't hear you.
when Mr. Phillips approached me, you know, several years ago, and they were mowing along the dike there, and he says, could you go around and take care of that land there? He says, then we don't have to take the city equipment, you know, down Magnolia and then back in through there.
So
it wasn't necessarily the $70, it was doing the city a favor by keeping it mowed down and, you know, keeping track.
I see.
So it's kind of a, yeah, they didn't want to do that, so
Well,
we took it on.
And I would add, I mean, trying to look at this as objectively from our vantage point, the reason we would conduct a competitive bid is try to maximize what response we would get. In an open market where you could have multiple competitive bids, that you probably do better at maximizing that. In this particular instance, we would be limited to saying, we'd have to limit the eligible bidders to those that have access in some way, and you'd be down to the two people that are at the podium.
I agree with that.
We're talking 7 acres, not 70 acres. Yeah, we're talking 7 acres. We're not, we're not.
And we always, you know, worked with the Elks, you know, no problems with them or anything. And Tom and I, we wouldn't have any trouble either. So they can go across anytime they want to and do whatever they have to do. Keep her going.
Okay.
Both sides.
I say we.
So if Mr. Tilburg and Mr. Pestinger, they can work it through and we can proceed, I mean, while the city would have to provide 60 days notice prior to the end of the lease to terminate it, we certainly could amend or change the lease pretty much at any time with both parties' consent, so.
Okay.
All righty, I am going to ask for a 3-minute recess. And just talk to the.
So, oh, okay. Okay.
All right. Thank you. I was checking on a procedural item. I will be leaving at 5:45. I will be giving an address to some National Honor Scholars at Central High School. And I think that's going to be a tougher audience than this one, although you all have prepared me well. But the Vice Mayor will take over at 5:45, unless this just happens to get finished in 3 minutes, which it probably won't. But all right, we can move now to item 7.1, 2, and 3.
Item 7.1, approve ordinance number 22-11107 on first reading, changing the zoning district classification from Saline County Ag zoning district to R2 on a 53.26 acre tract of land located at the north end of Foxboro Drive, east of Centennial Road.
Mr. Andrew.
I'm going to try to sit instead of stand for this one. So this is an application that is filed to change the zoning district classification of a 53-acre tract of land that's located at the north end of Foxboro Drive, east of Centennial Road. It's in an area that city staff commonly refers to as the donut hole, which is bordered by I-135 on one side and the airport industrial area on the other, and lies on both sides of West Magnolia. This donut hole is surrounded by the city on all four sides, but the hole is primarily outside the city limits. The particular property we're talking about is a landlocked parcel. It doesn't have any frontage on existing public street and has historically been used for farm ground. It was recently purchased by Storage Mart LLC, and that group formed Building Kansas LLC, and they're proposing to develop this property into a residential subdivision that would be platted and known as Aeroplanes Addition. So to address the landlocked status of the property, they have acquired access rights across a vacant tract of land owned by the Salina Airport Authority, and that would be a strip of land right in here that would connect out to Centennial Road, and that would allow them to build a public street access connecting to Centennial Road. To provide a second means of emergency access as required by the fire code, they're proposing to construct an emergency access road from the north end of the cul-de-sac on Foxboro Drive across what is a city-owned flood control levee and into the subdivision. The public street entrance with an emergency access road works for Phase 1, which would have 75 lots, but an additional public street connection would be needed to allow development to occur in Phase 2. So the proposal from Building Kansas LLC is to subdivide this into 169 individual lots for future townhome development. As proposed, each lot would be developed with a 2-unit townhome, and they filed multiple applications related to this property. The first application was to annex the property into the city limits, and because they wanted to be inside the city sooner rather than later, so they could submit a request for rural housing incentive district, their property was annexed on February 14th, 2022. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on the rezoning request on February 15th, 2022. That is coming to you with a recommendation to approve that request. And then on March 15th, 2022, the Planning Commission approved a preliminary plat for the Aeroplanes Addition subdivision. There is no City Commission review of that plat. That action is taken by the City Planning Commission. So our request area, we have agricultural land on the north and east, as you can see in the photo. We have property that's part of Schilling Subdivision Number 5 on the west, which is where they're getting their access. We have what is referred to as the College Park Plan Development District, which is located to the south of the flood control levee. That borders this property on the south. And then you have West Dry Creek Channel that's on the east. And there's an unnamed drainage channel that forms a boundary on the west. So this request, again, is for R2 zoning, which allows for 2-unit townhomes as opposed to single-family dwellings. If you look at the aerial and the adjoining property to the south, this site, except for the levee, is contiguous to 2-family residential development to the south. It's former Air Force Base housing directly south of this, and those are primarily 2-unit townhomes. There's an existing 12-inch water line that was put in as part of the Menards infrastructure that runs along the north edge of the property, and this provides for water supply and fire protection. The majority of this property is outside of the 100-year floodplain on the new floodplain maps. There's just some area along Dry Creek, and then there's another area of shallow flooding that is associated with this channel that would be flooding less than a couple inches, but not one that would require flood insurance or any kind of mitigation. We believe that this site is suitable for new housing development because only internal infrastructure would be needed. Most of the utility backbone is in place in the area, and the density that they're proposing is consistent with the housing areas to the south. As far as the surrounding area, the density, the home sites, the size of the units is very similar to the former base housing to the south. Their plan is to build similar slab-on-grade style townhome dwellings and intended to provide workforce housing for Salina residents. We did want to note that we did ask the applicants about storm shelters in the subdivision, and their response to us was that their plan was to incorporate safe rooms into the townhome footprints because none of these would have basements, but that, if you have questions about that, that would be best addressed to the applicant. This property and the property to the east is shown as future suburban residential in the comprehensive plan, so it was anticipated that the future land use of this area would be residential. It's got natural buffers on 3 sides. And so the plan, again, is to connect the subdivision to the 12-inch line on the north, and then there is water available on Foxboro Drive, and so the plan would be to loop the water line and have 2 sources of connection, 2 sources for fire flow. There was a benefit area created for the water line in 2010 when the Menards project was done, and there's an outstanding benefit fee of $115,371 that is due and payable when a water connection is made. There was not a sewer solution created by the Menards project, but the Director of Utilities has determined that it is possible to take this area and serve it by taking the sewer and tying it into a manhole in this location, and that would provide a gravity system for the whole subdivision without a need for a pump station. They're planning to construct a stormwater detention area right over in this corner, and then runoff would be released into Dry Creek at a controlled rate. This is now within the city limits, so the City of Salina Fire Department would be responsible for providing EMS response and fire protection. That would come from Station 3 on Belmont. This area is contiguous to areas of the city that are already being served by Station 3 and being provided with fire protection. As far as where residents would go to school, this is in the Schilling Elementary School attendance area and also the South Middle and South High attendance areas. Evergy is able to serve this property. It is within their service territory. There's no existing rural water districts or franchise issues that we would have to deal with, and there is natural gas available in the area. So in 1995, Centennial Road was improved to city standards and a curve was straightened as part of a KDOT project. The developers of this subdivision will be responsible for tying into Centennial Road. And because of the density proposed, which would result in 338 townhome units eventually, there was a traffic study that was done and to determine the capacity of the existing street system to accept the runoff or the trips generated out of this subdivision. And they determined that at full build-out, there would be a 55% increase to the current traffic volume on Centennial Road. Their conclusion was Centennial Road has the capacity to handle that, but they did recommend that there be geometric improvements made to Centennial Road, and that would consist of a left turn lane for southbound traffic turning into this subdivision coming from the north. That improvement would be the responsibility of the developers. As far as the comprehensive plan, the suburban residential area anticipates residential densities of from 4 to 8 units per acre. The density here is 6.34 dwelling units per acre, which fits within that density range. And so as far as the land use portion of this, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this application on February 15th, 2022. They voted 4-1 to recommend approval of a change in zoning district classification from agricultural to R2, and that was based on the findings that you see in your report. So your options this afternoon or this evening would be to concur with that recommendation and approve the attached ordinance on first reading. That would rezone this property to R2 multifamily residential. You could refer this application back to the Planning Commission if you disagree with their recommendation as to R2 zoning. You could direct the applicant to resubmit this application as a planned development district, which would require a site plan submittal and give you the opportunity to review a preliminary development plan for the actual townhome units. This would require sending the item back to the Planning Commission and would take 4 votes at today's meeting. Or you could overturn the recommendation of the Planning Commission and decide that the property should remain zone agricultural. This would not allow the developers to move forward with a residential subdivision plat if they had agricultural zoning. If you were to approve the ordinance on first reading, second reading would not come back to you until this property has an approved final plat, and it would come back to you with that final plat to consider second reading. So this is a preliminary indication to the applicants that you are supportive of R2 zoning and townhome development. We had tried to do our best to provide you as many graphics as we could in your packet, but if you have any questions about any of the drawings in the packet, staff would be happy to try to address those.
Right. Any questions, concerns, comments?
I had one, we approved them applying for the RHID.
Yeah, I approved sending it up to the state, for the state to make a determination of whether they're eligible or not. That's not their actual application, but it's an initial determination to determine if they're eligible for RHID.
Okay, how much of this project is hedging on getting approved for that, I guess is my question.
That would be something that's best addressed to the applicant as to their financing plan. And we do have representatives of the applicant here.
Any other questions for staff? Right, I apologize for not having your last name memorized.
That's quite all right. Lance Cochran, 763 Victoria Heights Terrace.
Thank you.
I'm one of the applicants.
All right, I believe Commissioner Longbine, you want to ask your question?
How much of this project is hedging on you being approved for the RHID?
Well, it's a little premature to say, quite frankly. We applied for the base grant, and we're waiting on that. That would be our first and foremost way of financing the infrastructure. RHID would be the second. We used RHID quite successfully in Lindsborg and really like how that works for us. And it helps us buy down the cost of the product for the individuals so that they have a good price point for the houses so they can have affordable housing.
So I guess my question is, regardless of how that, if you're approved or not, are you going forward?
Probably not.
Probably not, okay.
All right, any other questions, Mr. Cochran? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, any questions, comments from the public?
Dalton McDowell, Salina. If they don't get approved and we did all this work, it's going to be back just like it was prior with the stuff on Magnolia with Menards. They didn't get everything approved through Menards, so then Menards rejected it. Why are we putting all this effort in if they don't know if they're going to get approved? And that's what it's guaranteeing on. You cannot guarantee you're getting anything from the state or the U.S. governments. They do what they want.
I'll let you answer that.
I'll try to give you a comparison. We have what is known, the developers refer as Southview Estates, which I will call the Ryan Edition because that's its name, at the southeast corner of Schilling and Ohio. That property was annexed, zoned, all subdivided, recorded, all sitting there ready to go. The developers made a request for special assessment financing for infrastructure. That request was not approved. And so even though everything was done in 2015, that property sat until 2019, or actually 2020, when RHID financing was applied for and recently approved. And now if you go out there, there's infrastructure in. But the good thing about that was when they got their financing tool in place, they had a property that was already annexed, was already zoned, was already platted, and had infrastructure design plans for it. It just didn't have financing. So if this were to go through this process and be annexed and zoned and platted, and then it sat because the infrastructure couldn't be financed, it could still be picked up later, and that when there is a tool for the infrastructure. So it's not all wasted effort if you successfully get annexed, zoned, and have a plat, because then it's just a matter of financing. But the financing would be necessary to actually install the streets and infrastructure, but it's not a complete waste to have a platted subdivision, because then when the financing is worked out, you have something that's ready to go.
And I would add to that, in the development process, Salina and beyond, there are numerous steps in the process. There's numerous costs associated with those, and those represent risks to be taken by the developer. It's not at all uncommon in a planning process for something to change or for approval to be granted and something, the plans change or the project doesn't carry through. We, as a development strategy, have said we want to facilitate development as much as we can. So we've consciously taken an approach that rather than take everything consecutively, if a developer wants to move things along and is willing to invest in the necessary plan preparation to keep the project moving forward, we'll meet them where they're at. We're a service provider in response to the project they want to undertake, and we feel collaboratively have said that's the best customer service that we think we should be providing. If we hold out for our approval being the last final step with no risk involved, we're potentially deterring development, we're certainly slowing it down.
Yeah.
So these are necessary steps in the getting the ground, vacant land ready for development. And so while the financing mechanism is important, this is getting all the planning groundwork laid out. I did want to point out two things that relate to the maps that you're looking at and the preliminary plat that the Planning Commission acted on March 15th. They had two conditions that I think would be of interest to the commission. The first one was that an interim emergency access road shall be constructed from the north end of Foxboro Drive to Lindbergh Lane as part of development of Phase 1. Construction of this emergency access road shall be complete prior to issuance of any building permits in Phase 1. So the plan would be that the emergency access road would be constructed and in place before a single building permit was started. The second thing is on the preliminary plat layout that you have in your packet, there's a dividing line that shows Phase 1 and Phase 2. And so the interim emergency access road only works for Phase 1, which is 75 lots in the western portion of the subdivision. And there will need to be a second public street connection to an existing public street that meets the requirements of the fire code in place before any development occurs in Phase 2. So this and the present arrangement sets it up for Phase 1 and the first 75 lots, and the hope is that there will be some coordination with other development that's being proposed northeast of here to allow for a second public street connection to coordinate with that. But as it stands, this approval would only allow them to do the first 75 lots.
All right. Mr. Wood, was there any public comment online? All right. And one more public comment here.
Norman Mantle, Salina. Will any of this property have to be resurveyed? Does anybody know?
What do you mean by it's been surveyed for platting purposes, and so it's being surveyed and laid out for the first time. That the plat is prepared by a licensed surveyor, so it's being surveyed as part of this platting process.
But you're currently surveying it today, how? With GPS?
No, the land surveyor is going out in the field and taking existing monuments and laying out the boundary of the property.
Okay.
Are the railroad tracks still there?
Railroad tracks have been removed, and Union Pacific has disclaimed any ownership they have remaining in it's a 100-foot railroad right-of-way that has been abandoned, and so that has been incorporated into this site.
Yeah.
All right.
Mayor, are you ready for a motion?
Ready for a motion.
I move the commission concur with the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve ordinance number 22-11107, changing the zoning classification of this property from A1 to R2, a district on first reading.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve on first reading ordinance number 22-11107. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And I will yield the chair to Vice Mayor Ryan. Thank you. Need it. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Hope you enjoy your next task at hand.
Tough audience.
We're ready for 7.2, I believe.
Item 7.2, approve ordinance number 22-11108 on first reading, amending the future land use map of the Salina, Kansas Comprehensive Plan to change the future land use designation of property located on the south side of West Cloud Street, west of Broadway Boulevard, from future suburban residential to future urban residential in support of multifamily housing in this location.
Mr. Andrew?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Ryan. This is,
Mr. Andrew, before we get started, I believe 7.2 and 7.3 are the same property, correct?
yes.
I do have a conflict with Salina Rad Homes, not on this, but on another project, so at this time I will recuse myself.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you,
thank you.
Commissioner.
This is in response to a project that was developed by the Salina Housing Authority in consultation with other private investors, and they met with the city's development review team to discuss their project. And as staff looked at that, we showed that the area that was being considered is as part of a suburban residential land use area, and as we shared in the last application, that generally anticipates a residential development density of 4 to 8 units per acre. And this particular project is proposed in the density range of 18 to 19 units per acre, and that fits and is more reflective in an urban residential designation. So an application was filed in conjunction with the rezoning application requesting that the future land use map be amended to show this as an urban land use residential area. And so the property to the north and northwest, that area is primarily designated as an urban residential land use area, but the line stops at Cloud Street, and as staff looked at it, Cloud Street is an arterial street, and this is at the edge of a neighborhood. It has the National Guard Armory across the street. And so your role in this case is to look at what the future land use of this property should be. And the question is it more closely tied to the single-family subdivisions to the southwest, or is it more tied in with the Cloud and Broadway intersection? This particular site is 200 feet west of Broadway, and it's on an arterial street. It's at the edge of a neighborhood, and so both staff and the Planning Commission felt that such an amendment was justified. So on March 15th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing, and at the conclusion of that, they recommended 5-0 that the future land use map be amended to show this parcel, essentially Broadway, Cloud, Smith, over to Haskett as urban residential instead of suburban residential. So if you concurred with that recommendation, you could approve the attached ordinance 22-1108 on first reading. You could refer this application back to the Planning Commission if you disagree with their recommendation, or you could overturn their recommendation and leave this as suburban residential. While that wouldn't necessarily preclude that project from going forward, it would indicate a lack of support for the next item, which is a request to rezone the property. If you were to approve this land use map amendment on first reading this evening, second reading would occur next week at your April 11th meeting. So with that, I'd be happy in any questions you have about the land use map.
Questions for Mr. Andrew? Mr. Linkowitz?
Nope.
None, none from the chair or sitting, substituting chair. Any comments from the public or questions? I'll bring it back to the Diocese for action.
Vice Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 22-11108, amending the future land use designation of this area on the south side of West Cloud Street from suburban residential to urban residential on first reading.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 22-11108 on first reading. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item will pass 3-0. Next item, 7.3.
Item 7.3, approve ordinance number 22-11109 on first reading, changing the zoning district classification from MHP and R1 to R-2.5 to allow construction of multifamily apartments at property addressed as 721 West Cloud Street.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you. I can sympathize with Mr. Hennessy and his research about what happened in the 1950s, because I had to do that for this case here, and I determined that the Shangri-La Trailer Court was established in this location in 1953, before it was annexed into the city 4 years later in 1957. And that park was operated by Anna Marie Mosier, and it was licensed for 35 mobile home park stands. That was later reduced to 20 licensed stands, and then it was purchased by Mr. Stephen Copper from Colorado, who renamed it Palos Verdes Estates, and then he later closed the park and cleared the property. And it was recently purchased by Mr. Jeremy Forshee, and it is now vacant, looking for redevelopment. And so because of its historical use, the property is zoned manufactured home park, and the Salina Rad's Homes now has a contract to purchase this property from Mr. Forshee. And they filed 2 applications, the one you just heard for a land use amendment, and then this request, which is to rezone it from manufactured home park to R2.5. And if their request is approved, they plan to construct a 48-unit apartment complex with 1, 2, 3, and 4-bedroom apartment units and a leasing office. We've kind of summarized for you on page 2 the outline of their plan, how they propose to finance it, the types of amenities that they're going to offer, and in their view, above and beyond the scope of customary low-income housing. So they plan to have landscaped lawns, a playground, a multi-purpose space with a kitchenette. They'll have accessible units. They'll have a frost-free refrigerator in each unit. There'll be a common on-site laundry area, a leasing office, and a community room. On page 3, we've summarized that they plan to have 6 one-bedroom, 16 two-bedroom, 20 three-bedroom, and 6 4-bedroom apartments. I would note from staff's observation that it's fairly uncommon, at least in recent times, for construction of 3 and 4-bedroom apartments. And they are estimating their construction costs at $11 million. They're requesting R2.5 zoning because that lines up with the density they're proposing, which is right around 18.5 to 19 units per acre. As we look at this vacant manufactured home park, neither the current owner or the prospective owner wish to redevelop it as a manufactured home park. They think it's suitable for development of other forms of housing, specifically multifamily housing. It has 380 feet of frontage on West Cloud Street. It's 300 feet deep through to Smith. It's certainly suitable for some new infill development, and the prospective buyer thinks that the manufactured home park zoning inhibits their ability to redevelop it at a suitable density. And we would note that it is difficult to go around the community and find a 2.6 acre tract of land that's under single ownership with arterial street access. And so those characteristics make this a suitable site for some form of multifamily housing. As we noted, this is at the very edge of a residential neighborhood. It has frontage on an arterial street. There's quite a few non-residential uses to the north and east. There are utilities in place in Cloud Street and on Smith Avenue to serve this property. When we had discussions with neighbors on Smith Avenue, their primary concern wasn't about the use itself, was about what they believed was their underperforming storm sewers in Smith, and so they just wanted to make sure that the runoff from this site wasn't going to be directed there, and the plan is to grade the site to get it to drain to Cloud Street and then to storm sewers at the corner of Cloud and Haskett. We did want to point out that although Cloud is an arterial street, it only has 50 feet of right-of-way, and the property line is literally about 1 or 1.5 feet south of the curb line, which is very unusual for an arterial street. And that would mean that if there were sidewalks or anything constructed, those would have to be constructed on private property because there's simply no right-of-way to build public sidewalks. We did want to report that this, when we checked and then double-checked, but this is in the enrollment area for Schilling Elementary School, South Middle School, and South High School. And there is an incremental increase in traffic from multifamily to from the mobile home park, but it's not, because this did have 35 manufactured homes on it, and now it's going to have 48 apartments. It's not a great increase. Traffic will primarily utilize Cloud Street to enter and exit. There is an opening on Smith, but it's designated or intended for emergency access, although it will be a full access. It won't have a chain or gate or anything. You previously acted on their request to have the higher residential density, and so the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the requested zoning change to R2.5. So you could concur with the Planning Commission's recommendation and approve the attached Ordinance 221109 on first reading to change the zoning of this property. You could refer it back to the Planning Commission with 3 affirmative votes. You could direct the applicant to resubmit this application as a planned development district, or you could overturn the recommendation of the Planning Commission and decide that the current manufactured home park zoning should remain in place. So again, this comes to you with a recommendation of approval. We did put a packet of a site plan for your viewing, but that is not part of the zoning application. It's there to give you an idea of what the concept is for developing the property. If you have comments or suggestions to the applicant on improvements to that plan, those would certainly be welcome, but the action that you're taking is on the zoning classification and not on the site plan per se. I think we do have Katie Jo Knox is on the screen via Zoom, and she's representing Salina Brad on this project. If you have questions you'd like to address to her, otherwise staff would stand for any questions.
Questions for staff? Mr. Longbine?
The neighboring property is concerned about the storm drain runoff. Has that been looked into and addressed?
Well, I've referred that to the Public Works Department, and it could be something to do with plugs or clogging, because it is a 15-inch storm sewer, which is fairly good size for a residential area, but it may very well be plugged or in need of maintenance, so I have referred that request to the Public Works Department to look at that, because at 15 inches, that should be sufficient diameter to handle most residential runoff.
Yeah. They're going to be covering up most of the ground, it looks like.
Yeah, they will increase the impervious surface probably over what was there as a manufactured home park.
And on the utilities, is the utilities substantial to carry the multifamily?
Well, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to loop, do a loop connection with Smith and Cloud to get two sources of flow and to get the necessary fire flows. And I think on the site plan we had in your packet, it does show they're going to be extending public water mains into the apartment complex, and we'll have fire hydrants within the complex. And then the sanitary sewer will be connecting to the sewer in Smith, because there is no sewer in Cloud Street.
Good questions. Mr.
More of a
Lightfoot?
comment, just it checks some boxes. It's an infill project. It's replacing an area that had blight, and it's definitely needed.
I agree. Much higher use for the property. Any questions from the public? Or maybe I should ask if either, or you say that one of the developers?
Yeah, Katie Jo Knox is representing Salina Rad, and we might want to see if she would like to add anything.
Ms. Knox, can you hear us? Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, sir, I don't have anything to add at this time.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone from the public that'd like to comment on this item? Being none, I'll bring it back to the commission for action. Is there a motion for this?
Vice Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 22-1109, changing the zoning classification of this property from MHP, Manufactured Home Park, and RH1, Single-Family Residence, to R2.5, Multifamily Residential District, on first reading.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 22-1109 on first reading. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That item will pass 3-0. We couldn't have sent that back to the planning commission anyway.
Yeah, we've been in a little bit of a quandary if we had to get 4 votes for something. So.
I was standing by to recommend postponement if the conversation headed that direction.
That brings us to other business. Commissioner, we better bring in Mr. Commissioner Hoppick.
Forgot about him. Thought he went home to watch the game.
Welcome back, Commissioner Hoppick. That brings us to item 8, other business. Commissioners, anyone have other business? I would just comment that the Kansas University men's basketball team is representing the great state of Kansas in the men's basketball final tonight, so we wish them the best of luck. Yeah. Citizens Forum. Anyone to comment for Citizens Forum?
I would ask Mr. Farber put a jacket on.
I was going to say, some of you are wishing them luck harder than others.
He picked wrong last time, so.
Yes, I did. I'm afraid I'm going to do the same this week as well. Vice Mayor, Commissioners, I just want to make one quick comment, and I know you guys are ready to go. I was able to drive by Billburg Park this past weekend, and there was a large ball tournament going on there. And something that jumped out to my attention was one of the players was standing on top of one of the new softball, what are we calling those things?
Well, bollard is what, from a parking perspective, that is a bollard.
One of the bollards was being stood upon by one of the players, and they were taking a photo of them on top of that bollard. And I think we're missing out on an opportunity for marketing for Salina tournaments, ballparks, by not having some type of Salina recognition on those softballs, or perhaps a sign with 67401 or Salina baseball or whatever it is, just to throw that idea out there for you guys. Perhaps have one of our local artists commissioned to do a mural or something like that out there at Billburg Park. But it was great to see the tournaments taking place, a lot of people out there, and it'll be a great opportunity for marketing out there.
I'm sure we get some new bathrooms out there. We'll have some
You know,
rural
we'll
opportunities.
have some surfaces that represent an opportunity. And
I know that the people driving to the facility are thrilled about those because an awful lot of people just drive right on by and miss it, so the balls really get their attention. Anything else for citizens forum? Mr. McDowell, are you, I can't see you behind the pole. Are you getting up or not? No, nothing? All right, I'll accept the motion for adjourn.
So moved.
There a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.